For 40 years, I've walked the line between worlds and am well versed in death. But I want to have faith in humans. Give me something to believe in. Earth below me, sky above me, fire within me. Brought to you by UPRN Network. I'm Trish Moe, and this is The Missing Piece. Good evening, everyone. I don't know if you can see me. Okay, I can't see myself, so one moment. Let me change my... There we go. Maybe. No, you still can't see me, but you can hear me. There we go. Good evening, everyone. I'm your host, Trish, and this is The Missing Piece. It is Monday, October 17th. And it is absolutely freezing in Kansas today for the first time. I think it's going to be that way everywhere. So that's not... I do love the fall, though. I love all the months, actually. I love the winter months because I don't like the heat that much. So I came from the north, and redheads can't get overheated. We just get mean, I think. So tonight I do want to talk about... Well, first of all, I want to thank Carnation for sponsoring the show, and I've been doing this for a year now. I started a little over a year, actually. I started on Chasing Prophecy at the end of last September. So it has opened up an entirely new world for me and a new network of people and weirdos like myself. So it's been amazing, and I want to thank everyone for listening and watching and being patient with my, technology mishaps, and yeah, that's something I'm improving on. So, but tonight I want to talk about... There have been so many movies and TV series and films and everything else not only made in Kansas, but set in Kansas, because there is a lot of really weird stuff that goes on here. And I'm sure, everybody probably in the entire world has heard of The Wizard of Oz. So that's obviously a very well-known one, as well as Superman and things like that. But there are some lesser-known horror movies, and most of them, ironically, which is really scary actually, are based on true stories. And that's really scary because that means there's a lot of really terrible people that have come through here. But we are known, we're in the middle of the United States. We're literally in the geographical center of the United States. So during the day, even before settlers from Europe came over and things like that, with the native tribes, the Midwest often was a point of major battles, because this is kind of where a lot of different tribes and things would come together, and there was a lot of territorial battles here. So there's that, along with it being kind of the midpoint to the west when settlers would start heading this way, like the Oregon Trail, Lewis and Clark's expeditions, things like that. Kansas would be kind of a midway point, and most of the time people couldn't make it through the winter past Kansas, because to our immediate west we have Colorado, and once you get to Colorado you have the Rockies. So it was probably nearly impossible to cross the Rockies or anywhere north of that even, because Wisconsin, Wyoming, all of those northern states get absolutely horrible winters, as far as the snow drifts and things like that would have been near impossible, um, in something like a wagon. So that's probably why a lot of things happen here, because they had no other choice. They literally pull off the road and stop here basically. Which reminds me of a story, of my own journey coming west, I guess. When I came here, I think it was I'll say when I came back here. It wasn't the first time I came here. I came back here from Buffalo, and this was probably 2000. Gosh, it was probably 2009, maybe. No, would have been 2008. 2008. So it would have been the fall of 2008. Um, so man, 14 years ago, right? I think that's 14 years ago. Um, and I started heading west, and the weather was actually pretty nice, in Buffalo. It was exactly November, the beginning of November, and the weather was nice when I left Buffalo. I headed into a blizzard. I'm talking straight up, couldn't see before I got out of the state blizzard, um, to the immediate west, through Ohio. I had to, they started shutting down the highways and I had to stay at a hotel there. And then I got back on the road and I started heading this way again. And all of a sudden there were warnings on the radio that there were tornado warnings. And that was literally the next day. So the road closed again. The highways, everything closed down because there was a tornado coming. And here I am going. I was probably around Illinois at that point. Um, and Illinois is kind of a creepy place to get stuck in. No offense to anyone in Illinois. I'm just talking about out in the middle of nowhere, small towns. Actually, some of those places don't even have towns. It's like a gas station and a creepy no-tell motel on the side of the road. Those are the kinds of places that I was getting stuck at when the highway was closing, of course. So here I am going through Illinois after, there's like blizzard warnings. There I even I guess for those of you in if you don't celebrate Halloween or Samhain, just a pumpkin, obviously, but this was a rotting pumpkin because um it had been there since Halloween, I assume, but they had an empty pool that was like cracked and moldy and just had stuff growing in it, and tumbleweeds were rolling by. I'm not even making this up. There was an El Camino in the parking lot and a camper truck, like not an RV, but the camper that you put on the back of a truck. And so there I am, and thank goodness, I had already flown out here with my son and left him like the week there. Um, and I went back to get my car, my vehicle, and my dogs and stuff. And so thank God I had my dogs with me. I had a pit rot mix at the time, who was the biggest baby, but he was probably like 145 pounds. And then I had a bird dog. And so I go to the front desk of this place, and there's no, like, I mean, it's seriously set in like a 1972 horror film, um, because that's how the decor was, which I'm not judging. I'm just saying nothing had been updated in this place. And I ring the bell, the for service. Even the gas station was already closed. It had closed down for the night. And so I ring the bell for service. Nobody comes. I mean, this is a sketchy ass place. Like, this was probably out of all the things I've been through ever in my life, this was one of the scariest things I've ever encountered. And, and so finally something starts stirring in the back. I hear somebody coming. A man comes up to the desk, and he's obviously been drinking a little too much. And so, and that's not the scary part. And so um he was kind of slurring his speech and stuff, and I asked for release. And I asked was how much the deposit would be for the dogs, and or if there's an extra fee or anything, or even if they allowed dogs. I didn't, I had nowhere else to go. And so he said the dogs are fine. He's like, no problem. But so he goes to reach for a key, and there were only like three hanging on the wall for that matter. He goes to reach for a key, stops, like he hesitates, turns around and looks at me, and kind of gives this funny, like chuckle. But I couldn't tell if it was because he was drunk or if there was some other, sinister reasoning behind it. And then he's like, "Oh, we haven't prepared that one yet." And I'm like, "Prepared? What do you mean by like you're out in the middle of nowhere? What does that mean to prepare a hotel motel room? I guess this was the kind that you walk in, your door is to the outside. So I guess it would be a motel, not a hotel." So anyways, he reached it, and then he gives me a different key. And I go to my room, and there were two TVs sitting on top of each other, of course. That was probably the least thing. I mean, I expected that. One was working, one wasn't, so they just set the other one on top of it. And then there's weird holes in the wall randomly at different places, which also probably expected. Like in the bathroom and in the shower and stuff. But that wasn't the problem. There were stains on the carpet. Again, in Kansas and this area in Midwest and stuff, I mean, this was Illinois, but I assume it might be the same. There a lot of hunters come through here, and I have literally had to stay at like motels that have a sign on the wall that says, "Please do not clean your game in the room." Meaning they would bring their whatever birds or turkeys or whatever they're hunting into the room and clean it there. So whether that's where the blood stains on the carpet came, and this was like, I mean, this was like 70s style green shag carpet. So that wasn't the disturbing part, right? So again, there's nobody else in the parking lot besides the El Camino and the weird camper parked at the end of the lot. The rest of the buildings look completely empty, no lights on, nothing anywhere. There is not another town for that matter for, probably like 30 miles. And so here I am. I wasn't going to touch the sheets for that matter. I mean, this still had one of those vibrating beds that you like put the coins in and shit. I'm not, no. So my dogs are just standing guard at the door, right? Because they already like they don't even want to, they're very they were pacing. That's how bad that's how bad it was. And so oh, I forgot, when I was at the front desk, I had asked the gentleman there if the gas station or if there was another gas station or anywhere nearby. And he said, "No. Why? Do you need gas?" And I'm like, "No, I have plenty. Thank you. I was just wanting to get a drink and, something to eat." He's like, "Oh, I have alcohol." I'm like, "No, no, no, no. No, thank you. No, thank you. I just need, maybe some potable water, perhaps, or something." But anyway, so he said everything was closed in the back in my room. And so there wasn't a lock on the door. I mean, there was a lock like on the doorknob part, but it didn't have like a deadbolt. It didn't have anything. Somebody could have just kicked the door and bust down. For that matter, they probably could have kicked the wall and busted down. And so here I am. And I'm like, "Man, what am I gonna do? I'm gonna have to go out." I had from moving, and I had my vehicle. I had blankets and sheets and stuff in my own vehicle because I was moving. So I'm like, okay, maybe if I put my bedding on top of this, but like a sleeping bag and then my bedding and stuff, I might be able to get a little bit of sleep because it was a 20, it's like a 26, 27-hour drive from Buffalo. Oh, thank you. I don't know who you are because it says Facebook user. You have to click allow, I think, in StreamYard. I don't know how they changed it. Um, but anyway, so there I am, and there's a literally like a somebody pounding on the door. Scared the holy hell out of me. I tell you, my dogs went they didn't even bark though. They're like, "Oh, we're gonna die. This is a horror movie." And so I go to the door. I go to the door, and this was one of those moments where I'm like, I don't have anywhere to go. So where would I go? Where would I go? Oh, hey, Jessica, thank you. Um, so I open the door, and there's the man from the front desk, and he holds up a six pack of beer, and he said, "Here, I brought you some drink." I'm like, uh, eh, well, you didn't have to do that. And second, I'm like, where'd you get it? He's like, oh, no, no, no problem. Whole, closet, he said closet full, room full, something of stuff that people leave. And I'm like, all right, thanks. I shut the door. Because I wasn't gonna be rude, and I wasn't gonna drink it. I mean, this stuff, it was like dusty, and it had expired like 5 years ago, prior. So it, I'm sure people did leave. They probably left everything they brought behind because this place was scary as hell. So the entire night, I swear, there were like, and this wasn't, I'm not afraid of the unliving, the unalive. Um, bec- but this was like the living were doing these things. And when I say like a horror movie, I'm saying like I would see eyes, and not just one pair, like multiple pairs through holes in the wall. And and again, granted, this was 2008. So we didn't have like the high-tech smartphones. We didn't have I don't think any of that came out, for a few years after. So I don't even know if I got service there. I mean, yeah, there was the little phone on the desk or whatever, but it wasn't, I wasn't going to rely on that. Somebody could cut the line. I've seen those movies too. But there were just like, there were eyes literally in my walls. And what's creepy when I say that right now, um, oh, there's a person. When I say that there, like right as I'm saying that, one of the first movies I was going to bring up has it like popped up on my screen on the other side. Um, that's the cover of our eyes. And so needless to say, it was the worst night of my life. My dogs, they were growling every 5 seconds. There were knocks on the walls. There were I kept hearing like it was like a whimpering sound, and it wasn't an animal. It sounded maybe like a woman or a little girl. Scared to death. And I was by I didn't have anyone to call. We're in the middle of a storm, and I'm in the middle of nowhere in a place that I don't know my directions there. I didn't have GPS, nothing. Like um and there was a clown. There was a clown on the sign. So I always think about the creepy clown hotels. And what reminded me of that was I changed my banner. I dressed as a clown last year, so that kind of started this whole that also sparks another story in the future that I'm going to get into about the clown demon. Um, that's another that could be an entire show by itself. But tonight, again, we're going to talk about movies that have been set or filmed in Kansas. And so I'm going to go way back to some of the older ones that people aren't as familiar with. Again, Wizard of Oz, everybody knows about. Um, but there's one called um, this was actually a comedy type horror flick, and this was in 1966. It was called The Ghost and Mr. Chicken. So The Ghost and Mr. Chicken, it starred Don Knotts. I don't know. I think he was from the Andy Griffith Show. Um, but he was a newspaper. Played a newspaper, or like a journalist. Maybe did something for the newspaper. Um, and it was in a fictional town called Rachel City, Kansas, although it was still filmed somewhere here. And he lived at like a boarding house. He was aspiring to be a reporter for the paper, and nobody took him seriously. Everybody mocked him. Um, and he reported on a murder near a supposed haunted mansion called the Simmons Mansion, and it that proved to be nothing more. It ended up being like a domestic violence situation where the guy knocked his wife out when he was drunk. And so all the other reporters ridicule him over his mistake, and he actually there were a lot of there was a murder suicide that happened at the mansion, and so he the legend was that there was a guy killed by his wife with a bladed instrument before he jumped off the building and killed himself, and from the organ loft. So this was back in the day when they had the big organs at the top of in theaters and stuff, on the top level in the loft. And so he reports on this murder suicide that actually ended up being real, and it was about an organ that played itself. Um, and so he ran down, like, after this organ started playing music, there were scenes of pruning shears stabbed in a painting of the woman that supposedly made this man, leap to his death. And so, with blood gushing from her neck. Well, that became an entire controversial thing in Kansas because that was in the original movie poster. And I believe there are only a few of those in existence, and they're said to be very valuable because um, they removed it in later publications from that poster. So if you have one of those and The Ghost and Mr. Chicken, it's very valuable. So that's the first one. That one's not extremely scary, but a lot of people do like Don Knotts. He was, a good actor. Um, the reason the movie was interesting because there are a lot of, for people that don't know, one of the ladies he has a crush on from the newspaper, her name was Alma, who ends up being held captive and stuff. And there's secret passages. There's things like that, but it makes me wonder. There's a town called Alma, which also has a crazy background. And then you can go, you can go back to why it's named that. There's goddesses and things like that in history. But the next movie was called In Cold Blood. Now, this one, I actually did a report on this when I was in college, when I took a class about the psychology of serial killers. I'm sorry, I had to get a drink. So, this one was 1967. It was a crime film, true crime, based on a true story, produced and directed by Richard Brooks. Sorry. And it was based on Truman Capote's nonfiction book with the same name, In Cold Blood, and that's the book that I was talking about that has the eyes. He has his eyes on the front of the book. So, it was shot on location where where Smith and Hickok's crimes occurred, at the Clutter home. They robbed and murdered 4 members of the family. This film was nominated for many, many awards, Academy Awards and such. But um, there were 2 ex-convicts, Perry Smith and Dick Hickok. They met in rural Kansas in 1959. Um, the Clutter family, which so I forgot about this. Um, that I did a report on this until I started studying this in the last few weeks. Oh my goodness, excuse me. Yeah, see, throat chakra. That's crazy. I drive by a place called Clutter something Associates. So the name is relevant. Um, Now I don't know how far that would have been. Um, but anyways, these 2 ex-convicts, they planned to rob the farm of a wealthy um, family man, and they had been watching him. They had been at his house, things like that, where he kept large supplies of cash at his home in a safe. Now, anyone who was familiar with Kansas knows that that is not probably, well, back then especially, um, in the smaller towns, people used to do that all the time, um, for many reasons. There weren't a lot of larger banks, for one, but they also, I don't know, they just Kansans don't trust a lot of people, so there is that. Um, and so these criminals break into his house in the middle of the night. They're unable to find the safe, and they use he has a bunch of checks that he uses for personal, um, for his farm operations and his personal business and things like that. Um, so they they didn't want to have any witnesses to their robbery, and they killed the farm owner, the homeowner, Herbert, by slitting his throat, and they proceed to murder his wife, Bonnie, and their 2 teenage children, Nancy, 16, and Kenyon, 14, with a shotgun. Their bodies weren't discovered until the next day, um, and the KBI, which is the Kansas Bureau of Investigation, is immediately launched into the crime, obviously, and um, it is said that there was a tip from Hickok's former cellmate at the prison that, I'm assuming they of talk of, what they're going to do when they get out, things like that, because but that's interesting to me. Like, how did they know that Herbert existed while they were in prison? It, is that something that they knew of him before? Is it someone they saw in the media? Is it just a wealthy person they saw? How did they know that? Um, and how did they research that while they were in prison? Um, and so, oh, hi, Brian. Oh, speaking of which, and I will post those links as well. Uh, I have, um, I was on Brian, which Brian's been on my show, as well, and we talked about that. But I was on his show last weekend, and Through the Lens with Brian and Lex, and that what day was that? That would have been October 9th, I believe. It was Sunday, so I will post a link to that. A lot of fun. I always go off on tangents talking about crazy stuff. Um, anyway, they actually, um, They fled to Florida at the time. And they eventually crossed into Mexico. I assume closer to, the uh, maybe Louisiana, or like coming over, because it was the Las Vegas. Um, oh, they returned to Vegas. I was going to say, how did the Nevada Police Department end up with them? So they spent a few weeks in Mexico. They returned to Vegas. They were going to gamble, I assume. They were also using Herbert's checks, um, and obviously had a stolen car, violated their parole, things like that. And so the Las Vegas Police Department um, later found them, decided to interrogate them on the Clutter murders, and they both admitted to the bad checks. They admitted to, I'm not sure if they admitted to the stolen property or the stolen car. However, they denied knowing anything about the murders. So, um, which is interesting, and I'm sure the KBI, the KBI did claim that they had left behind a witness who was willing to testify against them in regards to the murder. So, when they were confronted with the evidence, as which I don't think the KBI had very much evidence, because they were still going off of the tip from the one of the convicts' ex cellmates. So all they said they had a bloody footprint matching the boots that were worn by Smith. Um, and so things like this eventually led to the breakdown. Hickok broke down and confessed not to the murders, but to witnessing the murders. So he blamed Smith for doing everything. Um, and so he said he was present when Smith carried out the murders. He begged for immunity from the death penalty. And so, and see, the KBI was smart about it, though. They interrogated them separately. And so, um, after Smith learned that Hickok had confessed, he said that he did recount that it was in fact himself and not his partner who wielded the knife, who pulled the trigger in all four killings, um, but did say that Hickok was there as an active accomplice. So they were both charged with first-degree murder. They were found guilty on all accounts, and they were each sentenced to death by hanging. Now, after losing multiple appeals, both men were hung for their crimes, and there were only law enforcement officials. There were media representatives in attendance as well. But that is interesting that I didn't even put two and two together, that I assume I have been led to places that these people might haunt before, because I see that name come up a lot, and I completely forgot that I do a report on that. So that's, but there's a book. The book, as I remember, obviously is better than the movie, as they usually are, because you can get more detail in there. But they're both, I had to watch that in college. It's, again, it's an older movie, 67. But still an interesting story, the way it works out. And there's a house. It's filmed it's actually in Garden City. So well, some of the scenes were filmed in Garden City, sorry. Holcomb, Kansas was the other location of the original event, including the Clutter's farm. Their house was the new family that owned it. They were paid $15,000 in compensation to film the movie. The bus station in the movie was actually in Kansas City. And then there were also some of the scenes shot in Kansas City as well. So the Kansas State Penitentiary actually denied any filming, which was interesting. So they weren't able to film the execution chambers and things like that. So those were replicated in Hollywood, obviously. Um, but the production crew purchased Smith and Hickok's uh, actual latrines from their cells. Now, wouldn't that be a part of history you'd want to own? So, seriously, that's ridiculous. All right, moving on. Hello, Raymond. Thank you for joining. The next one, which I've actually studied a lot about because this came up last year, and actually, which is ironic again, it is the Carnival of Souls. Well, first of all, I'm going to go to one that everybody's going to be familiar with, and well, maybe, I don't know, should be familiar with it, is Superman. Although Superman is a fictional character, and I don't know that many, if any, parts of it were actually filmed in Kansas, but it was definitely set in Kansas. And there's been numerous obviously they've redone many renditions of Superman since the original. But going off the original, his ship landed near a place called Smallville, which is actually, and it's said to be a fictional place. However, if you're familiar with Kansas, you'll start to see a trend in these various movies that have that have weird things happen, because that's normal. That is absolutely normal in the Midwest. I don't care. From Michigan all the way down, it doesn't matter. There is unexplainable things that happen here, and now all of you who aren't from here, you're going to start watching these movies and be like, huh, maybe they do exist. Maybe these things do exist. So anyways, Superman, the plot, obviously, there's he was a young boy. I think he was 2 or 3, like supposed to be 2 or 3 in the movie, who was from another planet, and the Krypton, Jor-El of the Kryptonian High Council, they discover their planet's going to be destroyed when their supergiant sun explodes. And so he wants to save his son, who was an infant at the time. And so he sends him in a spaceship to Earth. And they say it's because his dense, this is quote, dense molecular structure will give him superhuman strength and other powers, which is interesting, because how many times on my show, let's get back to that, I didn't know that that was quoted on this Superman thing, right? And how many times have I talked about why I started. I mean, I was always into sports and lifting weights and stuff before I became a trainer and stuff. But it wasn't until after my first major abduction experience that I had remembered that I started lifting weights a lot, because what weighs, or muscle is denser, right? Muscle weighs more than fat, obviously. It has more density. So, and I've said that before, I've said it is harder to take someone due to the molecular structure and the density of your body. If you have more muscle, it's harder to take you through a wall, per se. Is that not correct? Right? So that's the reason years ago I didn't even understand at the time how or why I was doing it. I just knew it was doing something and that it helped. And so um, it's interesting that they say that in this movie description, that's why he has, superpowers or whatever. I don't have superpowers. I'm just saying this is why Superman does. And so um, when he was 3 years old, and I assume the difference in age between being an infant to when he was 3 years old was in space travel, however many light years it took to get here or whatever. And so his ship landed near Smallville, Kansas at 3 years old. He's found by Jonathan and Martha Kent, and he lifted their truck. I remember that in the first one. They decide to adopt him and raise him. They named him Clark after it was Martha, his adopted mom's maiden name. And they believe that he was sent to Earth for a reason, like a divine reason. So after his adopted dad died of a heart attack, Clark was 18 years old, and he heard a psychic calling, and discovered the glowing green crystal from his spacecraft. That's all that remained of his, the ship that he crashed. And so then he's compelled to go to travel to the Arctic. He, constructs this fortress of solitude. And he becomes a reporter and there's a theme here, right? It's always the reporters at newspapers. Anyways, and then he kind of lives this, everybody knows the story of Superman, lives this double life, the caped wonder, they called him back then. And Lois, the woman at the newspaper who he was in love with, she ended up writing an article naming him Superman. So she's the one that gave him that name. And so this criminal named Lex Luthor in the show, he finds out about the U.S. Army post and a nuclear missile test site. He buys hundreds of acres of empty desert land and reprograms the 2 missiles to detonate in the San Andreas Fault. With his assistant, Otis, accidentally programming the second missile coordinates incorrectly. So he knew all along that Superman could stop this plan. So Lex, he had recently discovered the meteorite from Krypton, and knew that it was radioactive to Superman. And so his little accomplice, Otis, and Eve Teschmacher, I don't know how to say that name. Tessmacher? I don't even remember it. Anyways, he sent his little accomplice to retrieve this and lure Superman to his underground lair. And so basically that reveals his entire plan to cause everything west of the San Andreas Fault to sink into the Pacific Ocean. Which would make Luthor's new West Coast, or Luthor's desert land, the new West Coast in the United States. Luthor then exposes him to the meteor piece's mineral kryptonite, which weakens Superman's ability greatly, and taunts him about the second missile, which will detonate in Hackensack, New Jersey. Why is this relevant? Or why did I just stop there? And this must have been, extremely relevant. Because, okay, let's go back to the Georgia Guidestones. This is where my channeling gets in the way. This is why I can't watch movies, right? So, and I've been looking at this the last few days. If you read about the Georgia Guidestones, they tell of all of the places that will be safe um, in the future, from natural disasters, from earthquakes, from falling off in the ocean, from tsunamis, from everything. And so the map of the Georgia, is specifically lists kind of what is going on now in the world. Um, it talks about the middle of the United States, right down the Missouri border. There's one of the major fault lines there being split. It talks about the majority of the southwestern part of California breaking off and going in the ocean, and it talks about the bottom, well, the portion of Florida basically that just got hit by a hurricane, as well as parts of Louisiana, a lot of the southern states, part of New York, New Jersey. So this is why this is ironic. And I was just I looked at the list of episodes last night because it popped up on my TV in the middle. This was 4 in the morning. It pops up on my TV, the old the old X-Files. Now, if you go to the X-Files and look at the chapter sequence when they first begin, you don't even have to watch the whole episode. I watched a lot of them when I was younger, but just look at the I'm trying to block somebody's doing like a spam thing in the chat room. Anyways, look at the titles, and you'll see how many of those things have come true. And those are all from the 90, 93, 94 era. So that's actually pretty scary. So this being relevant, I had never, up until today, I didn't decide, I'm familiar with all the movies filmed here. I did research on them, the movies themselves, watched them, but I had not read about a lot of the official descriptions. And I believe there's always a reason we put a message out there. So Hackensack, New Jersey, supposed to be the other one. Now, Luther's, one of his little, minions, one of his little accomplices, mother lives in Hackensack. But either way, he doesn't care. He leaves Superman to die. And so knowing that Superman always keeps his word, this test mocker, helps Superman on one condition, that he stops the eastbound missile to save his mother. So after being freed, Superman, of course, stops that missile. He diverts it back into outer space. But the westbound one, he couldn't reach in time. So that ends in massive earthquakes, damages the Golden Gate Bridge, breaches the Hoover Dam, and he stops it by sealing the fault line. So while he's busy saving everyone, Lewis is, of course, he's got to go save his girl, Lewis, they always have the most dramatic I think her car fell in like one of the fault lines or something. But I'm not going to give you the ending to that one. But there's a lot of talk about manipulating human history, and that he's actually there for a reason. And so he figures out a way to use time travel and things like that, but there's mass destruction by all these natural disasters as well, the earthquakes, the floods, everything. So I don't know how many Supermans came out after that, but most people are familiar with the concept of Superman by now. There's even the Superman, the girl, there's like Superwoman and all of those now. Oh, thank you, Teresa. I'm sorry, I got stuck on Superman here. um, for a minute. But that's another very well known one. That was the first one was in 1908, I believe. Um, creepy movie. I remember. I don't know why our parents let us watch these um, back in the 80s and such, but this one was actually one of it's still to this day a creepy movie, and I didn't remember that because I didn't live in Kansas at that time in the 80s, so I didn't remember that this one was filmed here, but it's called The Attic. So if any of you have seen these movies and would like and know anything about them, please comment. Um, I know that oftentimes when you know that a movie has been filmed in your area, like it makes it more well, especially if it's been based on a true story. But if it's been if just a scary movie you've seen has been filmed where you live, it makes it even scary. Like it makes it more real. So um gosh, this one. So this one was back in 1980. Um there were quite a few things that happened in that line of events, I guess, that should be mentioned. This was 1980 was a pivotal year for many, many reasons, aside from like the new technology in these movies and stuff. But in April of that year, Alfred Hitchcock died, which Hitchcock. Did I say Hickok? That was the murder from the from the In Cold Blood. Anyways, Alfred Hitchcock. He was the master of suspense. He died that year at the age of 80. But of course, everyone knows The Empire Strikes Back was released that year. Just, I know, I'm going to get hate comments, hate mail. I've never actually, well, I mean, I probably saw it when I was like 6 or 7. I've never seen Star Wars. Never seen it. I remember my parents watching Star Trek, but I've never seen that either. I I know, I know, I know. I'm one of those. I'm one of those. Yeah, I've literally never seen that. I think my son made me watch uh The Mandalorian. I know I'm butchering this and you're all gonna hate me, but no, I've never seen those. Um there were other weird Caddyshack came out that year. That's not, obviously not not a horror film. But there were a lot of things happened in Hollywood that year with the advancements, I guess I should say, in the film world. Back to gosh, I have so many. I'm like the um my ADHD and I see a squirrel. Um back to the attic. All right. So I lost it. Huh. I feel like I'm supposed to talk about the other one first though. So that's weird because I was so there was a film called The Gypsy Moths. Um and I'm wondering why I was just directed to look back at that because obviously that movie was I mean it was totally different than what you think it is. It was a story, it was a drama based on skydivers. Um because they had a different lifestyle than the small town Midwesterners. So the movie's literally about their how they lived their life and how the people around them lived a different life. But they were called the gypsy moths because when they would jump out of the plane, they looked like they had wings, which is interesting because what have we been talking about lately? The Mothman. Where has that always been present? It's been present aside from the East Coast, from the down through so from like outside the Chicago area, Illinois, um, and south. And it's been spotted everywhere in Kansas City, Topeka, you name it, all the way Oklahoma. Um, but I find it interesting that I was just ooh, and now I got the chills. This all leads back to there being a dead bat outside my truck, uh, like 2 weeks ago. Yes, before all the UFOs, came over Kansas and all hell, all chaos broke out in Topeka. I'm actually going to be talking about that with Joe Montaldo next week on next week's show, because there were a series of events um, preceding that. The picture, I took a picture of some sort of craft in the sky that was disguised as it was that new app I use that says, I think it says boat, which, I would librarian in Wichita, Kansas, who a depressed alcoholic, and she became that way because her previous fiance, disappeared the day before their wedding. But it has been 19 years, and she ended up having to take care of her abusive father, who's now confined to a wheelchair. So she suffered many nervous breakdowns, um, and she even started a fire in the library. So this lady went off her rocker. She resigned from her position, and when she was training the lady that was going to replace her after the fire, she did attempt to take her life, and she survived it. And so all of these things lead to her having fantasies about taking revenge against her dad and going so far as murdering him. Well, one night, she goes to this movie theater and she meets a man who was a sailor. And after the movie, they returned to his hotel or something, and they ended up spending a lot of time together. Um, they go to a pet store, and she expresses her affection for this chimpanzee of all things in a pet store window. And this sailor, who she's only known, granted, for like 2 days or something, ends up purchasing it for her as a gift. Um, she she brings the chimpanzee home, right? And her dad absolutely doesn't want it there. She names the chimpanzee Dickie, and um, she 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 doesn't want it. She stays in Kansas. Her friend, obviously, um, and the man she just met, moved to California. Um, even though she hates her life there, and so when her friend invites her to have dinner at her mother's house, Mrs. Perkins chastises um, the brothers of her friend because they broke one of her figurines, right? And so all of a sudden now, her chimpanzee goes missing after this like dinner party, and her father claims it ran away. Well, the next morning, she buys a plane ticket to fly to Los Angeles, right? For Emily, her friend. And leaves it for her at the library with a note. And she decides to go to the airport also, um, to call Louise and thank her for that. And so Louise brings her father to the park, a local park, And while rolling him up the hill, the wheelchair tips over and he falls out. Now, this is her abusive father who she despises, you know. And so she realizes that he automatically picks himself up and revealing obviously that he's not disabled. Um and the whole time that she's been forced to take care of him, it was just a ploy to keep her stuck there in Kansas, you know. And so in her she lost it. In a fit of rage, she pushes him down the hill. He ended up dying. He smashed his head on a rock. And when she goes to get her stuff from his house, you know, when she's trying to find his hidden money and things like that to leave, um, when she's going to run away, she comes across a key to their attic, the home's attic, which has long been locked and boarded. And so using the key, she goes to the attic and accidentally locks herself inside. Then she finds Dickie's body, the chimpanzee, along with along with I'm not going to tell you who else was in the attic because you're going to have to watch it. That's a messed up movie. There were some that reminds me of Flowers in the Attic. That wasn't filmed in Kansas, but that's another one that's highly disturbing about the kids locked in the attic. Um, this is also relevant because I rent my house. I have an attic that's locked that I've never, there's an entire section of my upstairs I've never seen, never been in. I don't even know what's up there. I know there's weird windows. Um, but that's nightmares. Thank you. Thank you all. This is this is for your benefit. Now I'm gonna have to follow up with you know, my attic dreams. Um so you can find like there people do lists of like dysfunctional family movies. Just it's highly disturbing. I'm only doing this because this is you too, Trace, that you have an attic that's locked that you don't know what's up there. It's interesting how many people. So I have a story about that too, actually, which that story might be more interesting than my next movie. But uh, when it actually leads into my next movie, when I went to college in KU, that's Lawrence, Kansas. I actually I lived in a townhouse with a roommate, and my roommate went home on winter break, and there was, you know, I stayed there to work and to study and stuff. I was taking classes over the winter semester, and I would be in my room on my computer, you know, like I am now, basically. But there was, I had my desk to a wall, and there's a door behind me, and we had both of our rooms upstairs, and then there was a spare bedroom up there, which we didn't have any. You know, we were poor college students, like we were freshmen. We didn't have any furniture in that spare room. We didn't have anything. We never even went in there for that matter because we didn't have anything to put in there. There was just no reason for it. And so we kept the door closed. But I had this little dog, who he was a little Maltese, and he acted, I don't know, he acted so weird around. Like he would go up to the door and like sniff underneath of it and just run away. And then things started happening at my townhome because I got off work really late. I worked until like 11 at night. Um, because it was my, you know, it was my after school job. And so I would get home from work, and my little dog preferred to stay in his kennel when I was gone. He weighed like 3 pounds, so I assume he felt safer. But I would get home, nobody there, and the thermostat would be set to like 90 degrees, you know. So me having been around spirits and stuff my entire life, I automatically thought that maybe it was a ghost or something that was changing the thermostat because things like that kept happening. And then there would be like doors slamming and stuff. Well, I would hear when I would be at my computer studying, I would hear, you know, if it's dead silent, you can hear like, even though I had carpet, you can sense someone walking like on the carpet behind you. That just creeped me out because right before that, I saw like, anyways, and so you can hear somebody walk. If it's really silent, you can sense a presence and stuff. It's with any spirits, but this was like a human, like a person, like a human presence, a lot living presence, I should say. And so, finally after Christmas break. Oh, no, so I ended up going to this was back when we wrote checks for things, back in those days. And I was at some store and I wrote a check and the man there says, "Oh, that's where I used to live." I don't know if he meant like the same place or the same, as apartments or townhomes or whatever. So um he said the old manager used to drill holes in the walls and peep on female tenants. And I'm like, and he's like, "See you around." I was like, what here I am, first year of college, like there's some creepy dude that has my address and all my information on a check, and just said, "See you around." So creepy. But anyways, after my roommate came back, when Christmas break was over, it was like a Saturday morning or something. We're both asleep, obviously. Um, I hear somebody run down the stairs and out the front door. And I'm like, holy hell. And so I go get my roommate. The guest bedroom door is open. We both come out of our rooms and we'd gone we well, he had gone up to the attic before when we first moved in. There was nothing up there. Um and and so after this happened, there were like candles and footprints and I don't know, blankets, all kinds of stuff that up there. So somebody had been living in my attic. Somebody had been living in my attic this entire time, like all that time that I thought somebody was in the house. Somebody had been living in my attic. And now that I say this, I'm thinking about the attic I have now. Holy shit. How creepy is that? Anyways, but that goes to show like how often do we not know what what's around us, and it goes the same, it's the same with spirits, and we talk about that all the time. Like you don't know who lived in the house before you bought it or you rented it or whatever. You don't know the history. I mean, some of you look up the history of it, but most people, most investigations I've gone to, most spiritual things I've looked into, they don't even bother looking into the history of the house past like the inspections and when it was built and all of those things. They don't care who lived there. They don't care what's happened there. But that's the first thing I do because I want to know what's going to haunt me. I want to know what I'm getting myself into, because a lot of those times we're drawn to places. You'll hear numerous people on these networks talk about how they're stuck in a place or in a house or a location or whatever. They feel like they can't leave because they were drawn there. And then once they got there, they were stuck. That happens a lot. There are houses that will call you to it. Like that's a thing, and then people get stuck at that part because they feel and their lives just go downhill. And um after discussing this with I was talking to my niece about it, about the person living in my attic, because the same thing happened at two other houses I lived in. And I even talk about this one, having the weird door, and it's happened everywhere I've lived. And she's like, you know what, that happened to me too. There was somebody, I could have sworn there was like a secret door and somebody was living in our attic. And then Trey said, you said me too, for like surveillance reasons. And so that's creepy. If that's happening, because aside from spirits living there, this is like real people, you know. Um, and it's definitely, I don't think, and I've never got that feeling that it was like a squatter, and for those of you, that's like a slang term for um, just someone who's homeless or a bum or something that um just needs a place to stay. I've never gotten that. Like, most of the time they wouldn't risk, they don't want to deal with having to work around someone actually all still living in a place. You know, they're more likely to go to abandoned buildings and such. But this is houses that are lived in. I'm talking about. And I don't know how many times I could tell you that has happened in my own life. One time in New York, though, um, the people that lived next door in the townhome, but we shared like their side was supposed to be locked. It was like a double door that went to the attic. Well, the attic was my room, and craziest experience. Like, some really nice people lived there before them, and right after they moved, these people never. I never saw them come out during the daylight, which isn't weird. You know, some people, whatever, sleep during the day because they have night jobs or something. But they all wore the same. It was like a cult. It was like living next to a cult. Um, they just wore these dark hooded, like, robe looking things all the time. They would be standing at, we shared a back porch, and I had a giant, like, window, glass window on my back door, and they would just be standing there looking at me through it, like, first thing in the morning and stuff. This happened all the time. Like, I can't tell you how many times this happened. That house was so haunted. My friends stopped coming there. Things would be thrown across the room. My kids were terrified. I mean, like, this was when they were young, young, young. And there were other things like my son's gerbil was outside of its cage literally every day. It had a metal escape proof. Like, there was no way, no way, no way. And it would always end up right where I was, whether it be like, this was a huge house too. I mean, I could be really, really far away, like 3 stories down, and all of a sudden the gerbil would be at my feet. So it was like taunting us, like messing with us. And then that's the house that had 9 stabbings throughout history, by the way. So that was a very uh I can't even the things that happen there are unreal. I don't know how I lived there for almost a year. Um but I ended up moving right across the street just to get away from it. Um and which comes back to the damn clown, I tell you. And clowns are you know, a lot of people are scared of clowns because um well, clowns are scary. They have a smiley face all the time. I don't trust anybody who smiles all the time. Um, but when I moved across the street, I was all excited. I was on the phone with my mom. I'm like telling her about my new house. And this was a big house too. New York houses are enormous. Like the old style, because they were meant for like multi-families. And so I was telling her about my new house, literally on the phone with her, and I go down to the basement for the first time because it's scary and big, and I didn't want to be, I'm still, this was like, I don't know, I was probably like 35. And so I go to the basement, and I said, well, after all I've been through, at least now all that I'm afraid of is clowns. I swear to you, happened then, out of the ceiling. Out of the ceiling. Like, I mean, I know in people's basements back then, like, they stuff weird stuff, just as storage, like in the slats in the ceiling and stuff. Like, I get that. No, out of the ceiling, this retro, like, vintage clown, I don't know, poster picture thing falls out of the ceiling. Not even kidding. Falls right at my feet as I'm on the phone with my mom. And I'm like, are clowns. Like, I hadn't even gotten it out of my mouth yet. Um, which is interesting that I dressed as a clown last year, because that's when a lot of these things start coming back about this entity. Um, And that house actually, that one, it wasn't near like the other one, wasn't near as haunted, but that was the first thing that was seriously creepy. Um, I had never at that point, I had never had anything like that happen, like, as far as soon as I would say it, it would happen. And things like that happen to me now all the time. But back then it was weird, you know. And and it was a few years later that would have been 4 years ago now. Um, my daughter was sleeping with me because she was afraid of the dark. She was probably, I don't know, she was probably like 4 or 5 at the time. I had a dream about a clown being at my front door knocking, saying bang bang, and um like in a weird bozo looking, you know, and that's all he said when he bust through the front door. Well, I was asleep, mind you, having this dream. It wasn't like one of my waking visions. This was actually a dream in my sleep. My daughter's waking me up at the same time. She's, you know, pushing my, she's like, "Mommy, mommy." And she says, "Something, there's someone's at the front door. They just said bang bang. I'm gonna go see who it is." Like it was calling to her. This was like 3 or 4 in the morning to come to the front door. And I was like, wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute. It would be one thing if her and I had the same dream, because that happens a lot because you transfer the energy. We didn't just have the same dream. She was awake and heard it and thought it was real. And so then I was like, okay, this is dangerous. Like that's really dangerous. Um, so there's something physical, something physical energy, or a person who has manifested and created that and is trying to lure my daughter. You know, it was scary because all of a sudden throughout the years, all these things, the clown hotel, the um the picture dropping on the ceiling, and now someone being in a front door, um they it was all too. So last year, it was when I went to oh my gosh, there's this AI. They've got new AI hacker things for chat rooms. Um, yeah, so it was last year. I dressed as a clown, and when I was at the Sally House, um, I wonder if I can pull up a picture. This is terrifying. Oh my gosh. Um, let me show you all. It is. I'm not even gonna say the name. I'm just gonna. I mean, I can maybe. I don't know. Picture freaks me out now though. Um, and it's a clown demon. But it makes a lot of sense. Like these things can okay, that's scary. That's terrifying. Okay. So this is called the Book of Asmodeus, right? Wow. Okay. So also, let me tell you, let me this is crazy, y'all. This is crazy. You're gonna look at this and you're gonna be like, okay, that's like every episode of Trisha's show, and I've never shared this. So, um, let me share my screen on this so you all can see. Oh my God, I've had this theory for a while now. Let me bring this up. Share share screen. Reason. I've never clicked on this website ever. Um, uh-oh. Okay. I Want to share Chrome? I thought I lost everyone there for a second. Okay, so here it is. Here is the Book of Asmodeus site, right? It's an interactive site and game, actually. This is terrifying, and I'll tell you why. So, all I've ever seen, I've never seen this part. I've seen the picture. This picture, I don't know if you can see my mouse. This picture right up in the corner, it looks like a creepy clown demon. So, this basically says survive and write your own story. Interactive physical augmented reality horror book and game. It's a handmade book with 126 pages and polymer clay cover. Write your own adventure with your own portrait. Summon demons from the pages and defeat them. But be careful, the game is very difficult. And, uh-oh, it's double and. The demons come to life in your room. Good luck, my old friend. I'm not, oh my God. So the archetypes, there's the classics are the jock, the final girl, the fool, the nerd, the cheerleader. The choice will determine the type of puzzles that are presented to you. And so here's like a wolf, what is that? With like a jester thing above it. That looks like a deer, like a stag, a buck with wings and a halo above it. You have like, I think that's an owl with a handprint and glasses, maybe. And then you've got this octopus thing and it says, "Who are you?" And there's like some werewolf looking thing. So, and this has been, I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with this because it says it's been on Forbes and MTV and GameStar, Medium, all these things. I feel like I'm the last person to figure out to see this, like, ever. But here's the crazy thing, and it says it's from Hungary, right? Like, I mean, I assume the country. And so, let me get back to. So, what's crazy about that I've been wanting to talk to a few different authors about, and as well as paranormal investigators, when we discuss, when we bring up historical crimes, when we bring up historical events, locations, wars, when we reenact these things, when we talk about them, when we give energy to them, are we bringing them back to life? And second of all of these things throughout history, every cryptid, every creature that anyone who has ever imagined, is the energy and the thought process of them doing so, the very act of putting an idea, a thought into the universe. That means it already has momentum. It is already written in the book of this world and in your existence. If you have thought it, it's already in action out there. There's nothing that can ever dissipate that energy. So are we, by writing these fictional stories of monsters, and this is why I say it's dangerous to get lost in a fantasy world. That's what gamers do, right? I personally, I don't play games, nothing against it. I never got into that because I had a hard enough time throughout life determining, my reality was crazy anyways. So it probably would have made it more difficult to determine what was real and what wasn't by playing different reality games. Are these games and are these this literature and these, because remember I did the book, The Most Dangerous Books, a few weeks ago also. Are those things actually creating all of these monsters and all of these things in our world? But, if that's so, and if you create your own world every day by writing your whatever script you're living in, whatever story you have. See, that never made sense to me because there's so many things that I've seen that I've never in my wildest dreams would have thought about or witnessed, or maybe I did. Maybe it's something that was from my dreams that I didn't even realize my mind had conjured up, quite literally. Um so that's interesting to consider. But the fact that there's an actual website that does this that is based on everything I have said about that is absolutely terrifying. Terrifying. Like the fact that you can create demons with the intent of bringing them to life in an interactive game. Although maybe, I mean, would that help you defeat them? I don't know. But is it actually happening in real life, like in people's reality, in this matrix? Um, that's crazy. Um, Especially since the other one that I wanted to talk about being in Lawrence was called The Carnival of Souls, which wasn't a very well known movie. But I mean, it's a cult classic, and it was filmed in Lawrence, and it's really, really eerie, actually. Um, and clowns go with carnivals, right? Go with the circus carnival. Um, so right when all of that happened, um, last year when I was seeing that, there was a giant I think it was called Carnival that came through town here, and it was a giant circus, and I was like, I'm done, I can't, I cannot. And then I learned of the movie being, like 30 miles away from me, and that's even scarier. So there's definitely something going on with all of these, but let me know in the comments. I should do a poll about that and see how many people have either written something that has come to life. Here we are in like the never ending story type thing. Or what other movie? Deadpool did that, I think, didn't they? Um, has either written something or drawn a picture that you later saw in real life. And tell me what theory you have. Do you think that since timing is fluid, that's something you had already witnessed, so you knew what to draw or write about? Or do you think that whatever you wrote about or draw came to life? So ponder on that. Um, it's already 10 o'clock, y'all. I just rambled on for almost 2 hours. Actually, it's like an hour and a half. But again, next week, Joe Montaldo and I will be discussing a lot of these theories, actually. And so I will have him on. And I'm going. I don't know. I have mixed feelings about this whole website. So let me know if you test it. I'm really worried if you do. Don't put me in your book if you do in that case. Um, oh my God, now everybody's gonna be like, I was watching or listening to the missing piece. No, don't do that. Don't do that. I will rewrite it. Um, but let me know if you've ever tried it, because I don't know, maybe I'm not dissing their website. That's just scary as hell to me. So let me know if you've tried it. Let me know your experiences. Again, thank you for watching. Thank you for all of your support. Please go like and subscribe to my group page. That's where you'll get all my updates on the missing piece with Trish Mo Facebook group. But also I'm determined, like which I get, everybody subscribes to the UPRN page, and that's fine too. But I'm going to start doing more updating, I guess I should say, to my YouTube page as well. So I only have like 16 subscribers now because I really haven't ever done anything with it. And then I also am starting shows on TikTok as well as YouTube for Teamo Trishmo, which is TEAMO Trishmo. So that's the with love one. Anyways, have a great evening, everyone. Be safe out there. I hope these storms that are coming don't cause too much chaos and destruction. But I think we can all weather them now. We've been through a few years of chaos and crazy stuff. So I look forward to next week's show.
Now, if you've never been to the Angel Rock before, welcome, as well as those that are listening and returning. I appreciate your support. Just a little plug for our network. There's many great hosts and shows on the network, so please make sure to share. There's something for everybody here. Now, with my show, I say cover all aspects of the esoteric with spirituality. I also have power of the mind, power of how to access your own gifts. Dave, so glad to see you. Got to give Dave a shout out. Dave's a big supporter of our show. Thank you for being here, Dave. And also, I like to say throw a little bit of truth seeking in there as well. But my show always has a positive spin, and the guests that I have on my show depends on what they're doing, either professionally, extracurricularly, or both. They're making a positive change for humanity. And my guest this evening is no different. I'm going to read her bio here, which I had ready. Hang on as I scroll up. Here we go. Her name is Louise Hamlin, and Louise talks about her personal experience of grief in all facets and in a way that will resonate with readers who are bereaved. That's not the part I wanted. Where did we go here? Sorry, guys, hang on. That is not what I wanted. Never fails with technology, I swear. Oh, there we go. Louise Hamlin read history and law at Cambridge and then practiced as a solicitor. After a career break to have her children, she returned to Cambridge as a law fellow and lecturer, specializing in land law. She was a tutor and then senior tutor of her college. 15 years ago, she changed career and moved down to Dorset to start a very happy new life with her second husband, a barrister. She became a potter, and she and her husband traveled extensively. When her husband, Patrick, suddenly died 2 years ago, Louise was grief-stricken, rightfully so, and then amazed to find more and more signs from her husband, including extraordinary WhatsApps showing her that spirit and love survived death. This completely changed her understanding of life and death, and she felt compelled to write a book called WhatsApps from Heaven, which we're going to talk about tonight, giving an account of the signs from the afterlife as well as dealing with bereavement generally. She now lives in Dorset with her beautiful spaniel. Welcome, Louise. I'm so glad to have you here.
Well, thank you, Laurelie, and I'm delighted and very honoured to be with you.
I was so when I saw, because I gotta give Gavin Lee Davies another shout out. He always sends me the best guests, and he's a publisher with John Hunt Publishing, who published your book, right?
Yes, that's right.
Actually, I've had Gavin on the show before myself. He's quite a character. I just love him, and I've never heard anybody say an unkind word about him. He's just such a lovely person.
No, he really is, and he's very, very enthusiastic.
Yes, he is. Now, I want to give you guys a huge heads up, as I always do every week, and hopefully it wards it off, knock on wood. The veil is thin. We're getting thin with this. We're counting down to Halloween here, and we've had all paranormal Halloween type shows. But I booked you quite a few months ago, Louise, and I knew that this would still fit in with our topic because we're going to talk about the afterlife. But just so you know, just in case, if I disappear, okay, my phone is acting crazy. It'll go into, I have an Apple phone. I call it the spinning wheel of death. It'll look like it goes black. if I disappear, Louise knows she's just going to keep talking. I've got my computer right there. I will be right back just in case it does happen. So I let everybody know. So let's talk now. This is an interesting topic that you're dealing with. So you're a solicitor. For those of us over in North America, that would be akin to what we would call a lawyer or an attorney versus a solicitor in the UK.
Yes, that's right. And then I taught land law and
Wow.
and revenue law. So you can't get much drier than that, really. So I was a very sort of, I guess, conservative lawyer, really. Conservative in thinking. So I never ever expected that I would end up knowing that there's an afterlife and that our spirits survive.
I could hear you though, because as I was telling you before the show began, this is a topic right up my alley. I never planned on being a medium or a psychic. And, everybody has such a unique story how we get here. I always said I never went looking for the paranormal. Not that I would call the afterlife the paranormal necessarily, but we lived in an extremely, extremely haunted house. My partner, he's been thrown 15 feet across our kitchen. It started out with this insane, as I'm telling you, 16 years ago. And it's like it happened 10 minutes ago. And it was something evil. It told me its name, told me how to spell it. And I had been raised Roman Catholic. I'd been forced to go to Catholic school and church every Sunday. I'd never heard this name before. And it turned into the craziest story. We've actually shared it on the Travel Channel, one of their shows. So you meet people from all over the world. But my whole point is, we all come to this realization of there's something beyond death in different ways. And for yourself, you've written the book, obviously, right?
Absolutely, because I was just amazed at what happened. Mm-hmm. I had never expected it or anticipated it. I thought that death was the end. Mm-hmm. I was totally and utterly heartbroken and devastated.
I can't even imagine.
Mm-hmm. It was, grief is awful. And then these signs started to come. And I resisted believing them for a long time.
Okay, so what kind of signs, so people can see this? Because I'm going to share something very quickly before I get to the signs. I go on a lot of different podcasts, and I had somebody contact me one night. It was about 12:40 at night, and they'd had a guest cancel, and they asked me, would you come on and do readings? And I usually don't do readings on air. And I said, well, I guess I could. The person that was supposed to come on wasn't able to make it the following day. I guess their internet didn't work the day it was supposed to be planned. So they asked me to come on. I said, listen, I don't like especially to do mediumship readings. They're very personal. It takes me a little while to connect. I usually like a picture of the person and what have you. So they were doing this to give back to their guests. And they were going to segue into your signs because there's a reason why I'm sharing this. And first thing I said on air is, I know when people hear medium, they want to hear from loved ones. This is kind of how my gift works, and I really prefer not to do readings. First person. Well, I was going to ask you for signs from so-and-so and a message, and I said, well, is there anything else? No, really, that's all I really need. And I'm saying in my head, as I call our angels and guides, spirit, I'm going, what are you doing to me? And sure enough, every person that came on, it was a mediumship reading, and it's so many signs that were so pertinent to the person came through. For me, it was a sign, I think, from heaven, if you will, that I think I set up these parameters that I could only do it if I saw a picture or what have you, when no, that's not what it is. And you had some very unique signs. That's why I told that story, because I think we all get signs very unique to ourselves.
Absolutely. And I mean, I also had extraordinary readings from mediums. Mm-hmm. But as far as the signs were concerned, well, in fact, to start with,
okay,
I didn't get the signs. My friends did.
Oh, okay.
And looking back on it now, I think that I was probably so immersed in grief.
Yeah.
I wasn't open to anything or didn't notice anything.
Mhm.
But the first sign came just 5 days after Patrick, my husband, had died.
Mhm.
And our mutual friend, who is psychic,
Mhm.
she sent me a message on WhatsApp, actually. And WhatsApp is used a lot in the UK. I don't think
Yeah,
it's used
all
quite
over the
so
world, except
Right.
really here.
Yeah, I don't think it's used so much in the USA. So it's a sort of an app that sends texts and photographs, and you can have groups on it. So you have family groups and things. And so
But they have to know your phone number, right, to connect,
Oh,
because
yeah.
I have WhatsApp. Mhm.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And you create groups, and then members of the group can post, and everybody sees it. That's how WhatsApp works.
Yes.
Anyway, I had a WhatsApp from this friend, Jenny, 5 days after Patrick died. And she said, Louise, I don't know whether I should tell you this or not, but I'm going to. This morning, when I woke up, I was thinking about Patrick, and I asked him to send a sign to her, and she took a photograph of it, and she just got a photograph of it in time, because then it disappeared.
Wow.
And she said, I'm sure it was a sign from Patrick. I don't believe in coincidences.
Right.
It was a sign.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I got this, and I thought, well,
Yeah.
yeah. I'm thinking, and I thought, well, actually, I do believe in coincidences.
Mm-hmm.
I don't anymore, but I did then.
That's right.
Yeah. So I thought, no, it'd be jolly nice, but I'm not convinced. And this same friend, she was then driving home from Patrick's funeral, and she had the radio on, and she said, oh, Patrick, can you send me a song that I can hear on the radio? She said,
yeah.
Can I hear I Want You to Want Me by Cheap Trick?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And she chose that because she said she'd never heard it on the radio, and it would be unusual. And anyway, she arrived home, and it hadn't been on the radio. So there we go. The next morning, she went to the local railway station to pick up her parents, who were coming by train to visit her. And as she was waiting for the train to come in, as she stood on the platform, guess what they played over the tannoy?
Want You to Want Me by Cheap Trick.
I Want You to Want Me by Cheap Trick. And she thought, oh my God, that's Patrick again. Thank you, Patrick. So she had those signs. Another sign that another friend, also psychic, received was lights going on and off when she was thinking about Patrick. Another friend sort of saw feathers, which came from nowhere.
That's common, yeah.
Yeah. Now, I, in the meantime, was not getting any signs. And all these friends were sort of contacting me and telling me about the signs they were getting. And I thought, oh,
I'm his wife. Why am I not getting these signs and everybody else is?
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, so I thought I would ask for a feather on a train. And I was asking for that because the next day I was going to be getting a couple of trains. So anyway, the next day I got on the train, and the carriage was quite full, but there were a couple of empty seats just at the far end. So I quickly went and sat down there, and I glanced at the seat next to me, and there was a feather.
Oh, I'm almost in tears. That's beautiful.
And I thought, yeah, well, it could be a coincidence. I was a hard nut to crack. Looking back on it, Patrick was really trying hard.
But Patrick knew you too. If anybody knew you better than you knew yourself, Patrick did, right?
Yes,
so he knew you'd be a tough nut to crack.
Yeah, and he was a very strong man and a very strong personality, and he was determined he was going to get this message through. So then, I then sort of got a couple of other feathers which seemed a bit inexplicable, other than that they had been actually sort of placed there. There was one night I left my clothes on the chaise longue in my bedroom, and in the morning there was a feather which was stuck aloft at the top of the clothes, and it couldn't have just ended up there naturally, because it was really stuck into my jumper,
Yeah.
So I thought, oh well, but it's really easy to sort of to not believe what you're seeing, and to think, well, I don't quite know how it managed to get there, but there must be another reason. So I still wasn't convinced. And it was only really when the WhatsApps started that I became sort of more persuaded. And what happened was, 2 or 3 months after he died, I went out and I left my mobile phone, my cell phone, in the kitchen, and the house was empty, and the house was locked, and the house was silent. There was no radio on or no television on, nothing like that. And when I got back, I picked up my phone, and I was really amazed to see that there were a whole lot of words in the message box on WhatsApp ready to send to Maria. And she was a medium that I had consulted. And lots and lots and lots of words, all in this message box ready to send to Maria. And I couldn't work out how the words had got there. Now, some of the words were proper words, but generally it was gibberish. And I was going to delete it, and then I thought, oh, I don't know. I'll just send it to Maria and say, hey, look, this is what I found, ready to send to you. So I did that. And I said, what do you think? And she came back and said, no idea, really weird. And then the next day, I had a WhatsApp from her, and she said, hey, Louise, I just picked up my phone, and look what I found on my phone, ready to send to you. And it was, again, a whole lot of words, but it was a bit more comprehensible. And 3 times it said, darling, it's me.
Oh, I keep crying while you're talking, and I'm not a crier, but oh, that's so beautiful.
And he always called me darling, that was, and he said, and it said Valentine's Day 2019, and lilies and various other things that, but it was the darling, it's me, repeated and repeated, that made me think, well, maybe he is able to sort of manipulate WhatsApp. But I thought, well, maybe Maria was making it up. And Maria is lovely and very sensible, and there would be no reason at all.
She wouldn't do something like that.
For her to make it up. No reason at all. But, of course, I was desperately trying to find some sort of rational explanation. Some explanation that didn't involve spirits from the afterlife.
Can I ask you a question, though, that's been weighing on my mind? It sounds like, though, that you and Patrick maybe weren't completely close-minded to this, because you've mentioned you have two friends are psychic,
No,
right? Mm-hmm.
no, we weren't. In fact, before he died, we talked about it,
Okay.
and yeah, and we both thought it was unlikely that spirit survives death, but
Mm-hmm.
we didn't totally close our minds to it.
Did he
No.
tell you if it is true, or like did you make an agreement that if we find that it's true that we'll try and let each other know, or
No, we didn't actually.
okay.
Yeah, no, I don't think it occurred to either
I
of
guess
us.
it did to Patrick after, though.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. So no, we had not closed our minds to it, but we
Okay.
thought it unlikely.
Okay.
Anyway, these sort of WhatsApps kept on coming, but they came via Maria's phone, and Maria was saying, "No, I'm not doing this. I'm not doing this." But there was a tiny bit
Yeah.
of me which was thinking, maybe she is. And it wasn't until the August that I knew for sure. And it was the 6th of August. And I know that because it was Patrick's daughter's birthday.
Okay.
And I was out walking the dog on the common with the phone in my pocket.
Yeah.
And I got back and I pulled the phone out of my pocket and I looked at the screen, and the screen notified me that I had created 2 different WhatsApp groups at 6 minutes past 11 that morning. One called Hamlin Family, one called Hamlins, one consisting of Patrick and me, the other consisting of Patrick, his daughter, and me.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked at this and I knew that I had not created these. I knew that the phone had been in my pocket. I also didn't know actually at the time how to create a group, but I just stared at it and stared at it. And this was something that had come directly to my phone. I knew it wasn't me. And I thought, it's Patrick. It is Patrick saying hello to me and also giving his daughter a birthday present, saying hello to her as well, letting us know that his spirit still survives. And do you know, Laura Lee, I looked at that phone and I just thought, yay! Patrick's spirit is still around. And I thought, there really is life after death. Our spirits really do survive. And it completely changed my worldview.
Doesn't it? Because, I have an adult son with severe autism. Hi, Manuel Lopez. Thank you for popping in. He says love and light. And I was having a conversation with him because, with no disrespect, he's very intelligent in some ways, but he's very much like at that precocious age of a 5 to 7-year-old child, where they're a little bit independent, like he still believes in Santa Claus and things like that, right? But yeah, I've got to do everything as a mommy would for a child around 5 to 7. So he finds it, he can read and write, though, and it's very terrifying for him about death. And it would be for a child at that age, right? Trying to figure it out, like, the person's no longer here. So I could have a sneeze or a hangnail or something. Not that I complain about a hangnail, but my son will say, Mommy, you're not going to die, are you? Mommy, you're not going to die. So I have to, I've had to explain to him that everybody dies one day. But it was really interesting that I just had this conversation with him. And I said, but you know what? Because he watches superheroes and things like that. I said, do you know that we are immortal? I said, you know what immortal means, right? And he said, yes. And I said, although we would all prefer to have everybody we love in body with us, in front of us, so we can feel them and touch them and hug them all the time, do you know that we go on ever and ever and ever and ever. And he had the biggest smile on his face. But it's true. We do.
Yes.
Mhm.
Well, yeah, do you know, I believe that now. In fact,
Mhm.
I'd go beyond that.
Mhm.
I know that now.
I'm writing a
I,
book. I'm writing 3 books myself, and my third one, I'm collecting stories mainly from nurses, but also first responders, because I worked quite a bit in palliative care. I always say I've been so blessed to be there hundreds of times at the beginning of life, working in the NICU with sick babies. And then when I worked in the community, I've hurt my back permanently, so I'm not able to return, which I'm sad about, but I wouldn't be doing this, right? So we got to embrace everything that happens in life, I always say, brings us to where we are. But I always say I've been so deeply honored and grateful to have had families ask me to be there as their loved one transitions, as I call it, back home. And some of the things that we witness, I believe, as nurses, because we are the ones that are at the bedside, we're the ones that spend the most time with family and patients, besides family or loved ones, obviously, but from a healthcare perspective. And I know of so many nurses that do what I do, as well as just have so many incredible, amazing stories that defy logic and reason, that there can be no other explanation, like just the pictures and the things that you see. So I'm writing a book about those stories, actually, and sharing them.
oh, well, that's brilliant. And
Mm-hmm.
why I wrote my book was because I just found this so wonderful. And I carried on getting extraordinary signs.
I was going to ask you that
Yeah,
next. So
yeah.
are they still continuing, or now that you
They
know?
are no, they are very few and far between
Mm-hmm.
now. But I did have some further extraordinary signs. I had, books flying off bookshelves. One
Ooh,
of the, yeah.
didn't that scare you, or did you know?
Oh, Laurie, the first time it happened, I was terrified.
Yeah.
Because it was about 2 o'clock in the morning. I was in bed, but I was awake. I mean, when you're bereaved, you can't sleep.
Yes.
And I was lying in bed feeling very, very sad and thinking, oh, Patrick, why did you leave me?
Mm-hmm.
And suddenly there was a thump outside the bedroom door, a really loud thump.
Mm-hmm.
And I was alone in the house. And I was so scared. I didn't
I would
know
have been
what it.
too.
Yeah, I didn't know what it was. So I lay there, frozen, petrified, and nothing further happened. And so in the end, I very tentatively got out of bed, and then I very boldly turned on the light, and I went out to see what had happened or who was there, which was the worrying thing.
Yes.
And there was a book. A book had flown off the top bookshelf in the landing and had landed with a thump on the floor. And it had obviously flown with a lot of velocity because it was some way from the bookcase.
Mm-hmm.
And there was no draft, there were no windows open, no rational explanation of how this book had happened. And I just thought,
Here, I'm
yes,
going to tell you something. I don't normally do this, but before the show, I asked Patrick. I said, if you're able to, and it's an agreement with yourself, I would love for you to be a part of the show. So we'll see. Maybe we'll get an EVP. Maybe we'll get something. I don't know, but I keep getting goosebumps, and it's not cold in here. So we'll see what happens. And I don't normally ask things of that, but I said to him, if you feel that it's appropriate, or you'd like to jump in, you're more than welcome. So we'll see maybe what we hear, or if anybody hears anything in the chat.
okay, that would be lovely. And I do feel that he's around all the time, really. So yeah, so maybe he will. I mean, another time a book fell off, and this time I wasn't so scared. Though again, it was in the middle of the night, and I had been searching for the binoculars because I had wanted to look at the birds, and Patrick and I had been interested in birds.
Okay.
And I couldn't find the binoculars anywhere. And anyway, that night again, there was a thump. This time I was less scared. Again, I waited just to check that it wasn't somebody, but no further noise. So I went out, and yes, another book had flown off the top shelf and was on the ground. And I knelt down to pick it up. And as I was on the floor picking it up, I saw the binoculars, which had been tucked.
I love it. Okay.
They'd been tucked into the bottom shelf of the bookcase. A really silly place to put them. Heaven knows why they were there. And I would never have found them.
Because I was going to ask you if the books were significant that had come out, or they'd opened to a significant part. So the second one obviously was meant to show you that he knew that when you bent down to pick up the books, you would see the binoculars, right?
Exactly. Yes. And I mean, the first book that fell out, it was Started Early, Took My Dog by Kate Atkinson. And I didn't see any significance in it, apart from the fact that I knew that book had been on the top shelf. So, I knew it had been sort of firmly on the top shelf. But anyway.
But maybe he knew, though, if you think about it, right, that it would get your attention. Like, I haven't left you. I'm here. I'm here. I'm here. And then now that you knew that it was him, right? I don't know,
Yes.
Maybe he put the binoculars, I keep feeling, maybe in that spot for whatever reason. Men think very differently than women, obviously. So there was a reason probably, but then he probably knew you'd never find them with the way he put them there for what reason, right? So.
Well, also it's possible. I'm not the tidiest person in the world, and it's possible that I had stuck them there thinking I'd put them away another time, and I'd forgotten about it. Who knows? I don't know.
But Patrick knew where they were. That's the main thing.
Patrick showed me where they were. Yeah. And I felt very grateful. And then another time, I was playing bridge, which is a card game, and 4 people play. So I was playing with my 3 friends, and we were round a card table in a room in my house. And when you play bridge, you have 2 packs of cards, and you play the first hand with 1 pack, and then the next hand with the other pack, and so on and so forth. So we played the first hand with the red pack. Perfect. Then we played with the blue pack. Then we got the red pack again for the third hand. And my friend Jane was dealing, and she was a card short. So we thought, she's misdealt. It happens. And so we all counted our cards to see who'd got an extra card, and nobody had. So we thought, the card must have somehow fallen off the table. So we looked on our laps, and we looked on the floor, and we stood up and shook ourselves, and we looked, and we looked, and we could not find the missing card anywhere. And we knew the pack had been complete the first hand. So then we thought we'd see what the card was. And in fact, my friends were saying, oh, it could be Patrick, I bet it's a heart. And it was. It was the 9 of hearts. And so they said, oh, is the 9 significant? And I said, well, no, I don't know why it's a 9. I mean, if it'd been a Queen of Hearts or an Ace of Hearts, then I'd have taken it. But the 9, don't know. And then, I don't know, do you do tarot, Laurelie? Right. So you will know that actually the 9 of Cups is a lovely card and means great love. And I didn't know that at the time. But then a couple of days later, I was telling my friend how this 9 of hearts had just disappeared from the card table. And she said, "Oh, well, the 9 of cups is the most lovely, lovely card, Louise. And that's a fabulous card for Patrick to have sort of chosen to give you a message."
Aww. So beautiful. Mother of 5 children, and her parents were doctors. I believe they're originally from Scandinavia, but they live over in the US and Texas. And he had a very, I don't want to say foul, kind of a potty mouth. Like he would use a lot of curse and swear words, and it's just who Eric was. And apparently had very, very smelly socks. There's reason for this. And he also liked to partake, we'll say, in the green stuff that's out there that people like to smoke. Okay, that start with an M and end with an A, just because we're on YouTube. Okay, so all the people in the family start experiencing these weird things, like the smell of his socks or the smell of the green stuff, or just little funny, weird things that, I don't know, maybe they could happen, maybe they couldn't. But his mother started experiencing more and more. And the biggest thing for her was her father called her from Scandinavia and said, I think I'm going crazy. And she said, "What do you mean, Dad?" And he said, I was just sitting there, he said, and Eric appeared to me like he would have as a 4-year-old. And he sat on my lap and he touched my face and said, "I love you, Papa." And they thought they were going crazy. Like, what's going on? Like, we don't believe in an afterlife. And the grief was just beyond words. And his mother did the same thing, started checking out mediums and going to more and more mediums. And there were things that she was meeting nobody would know, which I want to get into with you because I know there's some very unique things. And what had happened was, it went on, and she started thinking, there's too many coincidences here. This is beyond coincidence. So she started doing more and more research. She eventually put together a YouTube channel and a website, and she paid for this all out of her own pocket because people wouldn't believe her. But she connected with Eric on the other side, and Eric would bring people through whom she would interview through the medium. And some were quite controversial, like even Jesus and Mother Mary and quite a few people. Now, believe it or not, I mean, you could hear sometimes EVPs or electronic voice phenomena coming through with Eric's voice. One of the mediums was a trance channeler, so she actually let Eric use her body. Like, it's really different in a way, but I think our loved ones let us know for whatever reason.
I think they do. And one of the reasons I wrote the book was because talking to people who've been bereaved, I began to realize that actually lots of people have had signs, but they haven't dared tell anybody about it for fear of being thought crazy.
Or that you've lost your mind with grief.
Yes.
You're imagining
yes, it's all wishful thinking. And the more I talked to people, the more common this became. And people would then say, "Well, yes, actually," when I said I'd had signs, they'd say, "Oh, well, actually, I think I did as well, but I haven't told anybody." And then they would describe what had happened. And you would say, "Yeah, of course that was a sign. Of course it was." And I thought, it's so sad that people didn't really believe their own, because people don't know how common it is to get signs. And so I wanted my book to validate the experience of other people who think they might have had signs.
I love that.
Yeah, because it is more common than people acknowledge.
Well, plus I do a lot of work with people that are grieving as well, and and I explain that it's not with any judgment or any fault of anybody, but with everything being energy. from a scientific perspective, right? And one of the laws of physics is, you know, energy can't be created nor destroyed, but transferred from one place to another. You know, I don't know, depending how much you get into this, I would be called, I guess, what you would call collectively a light worker. And, you know, one of the things I used to hear, you need to raise your vibration, raise your vibration. What the heck are these people talking about? And then I realized, you know, by making ourselves happy, by letting in nature and laughing, and that's raising our energy, right? But when we're grieving, and that's where I was going with this, through no fault of our own, it's a natural process. There is no timetable. It's like it never goes away. It just with time, almost a different type of, if you will, normal starts to grow around it, I believe. But when we're in that space, our energy is so low, our vibration is so low too. And I was reading some of the things that were shared with what Gavin sends when he sends authors. And, you know, because I'd like to get into that with you as well, because I think you put some really useful things in there for people that want to help but don't know how to help when their friend is bereaved, such as yourself. It's enough just to even just wake up and get yourself out of bed, isn't it, when you're in the level of that grief?
Oh, I think you've just described bereavement really well. And the way that
I was going
the
to add one more thing. I'm sorry. I was just going to add one
yeah.
thing, and I realized I missed it. Thank you, though. But when we're at that low vibrational energy, is what I was going to say, it's so difficult when somebody is across the veil, if you will, to be able to make that connection, I think, for ourselves. Like, you know what I mean? There's a little bit of a separation, but like attracts like. And so I think I love that you've written this book, because I think there are a lot of signs, but we miss them because of what we're going through. Sorry, go ahead. And I didn't mean to cut you off there.
No, not at all. And I mean, I think this is possibly why I didn't get the signs directly from Patrick to start with, because I was in a very, very black place. I really was. I should think I hardly vibrated at all, you know.
Yeah.
And possibly he tried to send signs to me directly, and I wouldn't have seen them. I was in a trance-like state, actually.
Yes.
I really was. And in fact, that's so interesting what you've just said about how to raise your vibrations with letting in light and laughter and nature. Because I read books, and I sort of read that you needed to raise your vibrations to
I hated that term. I kept hearing that all the time. You need to raise your vibration. What the heck is that?
And I didn't know what it meant either.
Yeah.
But I read somewhere that if you meditated, it raised your vibrations. And actually, I started to meditate, and I did find that meditate helped calm the sort of the churning liquid inside me. Because, you know, I felt as though I had this really dark, deep lake inside me. I felt I didn't have any boundaries. I was just liquid, and it was all churning, and it horrid sensation, horrid. And meditation did actually just calm my inside a little bit. But I love your way of saying you raise your vibrations by bringing in light and laughter and nature. That's brilliant.
Yeah, when I talk, because I never, like I said, I might have said this when we were off here, maybe I did, or when we first started, but I never went looking for this stuff. It found me. And I wouldn't be doing, like, the experience we had, and I know I shared a little bit before at the beginning of the show and off air probably, I remember when we first talked briefly, I never went looking for this. It found us. And I always say I would not wish what we went through on a blade of grass, but do I look back with anger or regret? No, because I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing today. That's why I said it earlier. I say embrace it all, because it makes us who we are today. And you know, that's what's important. Like you said, like I said, with raising your vibration, I kept thinking, what the heck does that mean? And so I kept actively searching it out. What does that mean? And so when I'm speaking to people that are grieving or, you know, especially with mediumship, you know, we all have a go-to movie we know is going to make us laugh. You could have seen it 100 times. So I'll say that to people, like, put that movie on, have some people over that you know that they don't care if your house is tidy. They don't care about anything. They're just here to come and spend time. They want to be with you. We have people like that in our lives. We do. Just something that makes you feel good, that can try and make you smile, even for a moment, especially when you're, you know, where you were at. And it's not like it's always completely gone, even though we know that we go on forever. I actually said this when I was explaining about my son, but we would all rather have our loved one in the flesh. I mean, I know that they're with us, but it's not the same, is it? Obviously.
No, it's not the same, but it is a huge consolation to know that the relationship continues. And, you know, I carry on loving my husband.
Yes.
And I think this is the crucial thing, I carry on feeling him loving me.
Yes. Yes.
And, you know, that's wonderful. That's really wonderful. And yes, I carry around grief inside me. And the grief is sort of part of my body now, really, and part of who I am. But it is no longer something that completely overwhelms me as it did after he first died. So, yeah, it just becomes integrated into the person you become.
It does, and that's one of the biggest messages that I find that I get from loved ones, because I always find, and the biggest, strangest thing for me, I'm very clairaudient. So do I hear voices? No, because it's so hard to explain, but it's like in the mind's eye, but I can hear a spirit. Like I can really hear them. And how mediumship started for me very quickly, and it's in one of my newer gifts, and I think we can all do this too. I really, really do. It's just unlocking kind of how it works best for each one of us. Is I happened to be out Christmas shopping, and I was very lucky with a few of my patients that I looked after them in the NICU as premature babies, and then when I worked out in the community, because of some health issues the little ones had, they ended up requiring nursing care out in the community. So I would see them again. And there was one little boy, it was a twin, a little girl and a little boy, and the little boy ended up with cerebral palsy. And so I looked after him for many weeks in the hospital, him and his sister as infants, and then out in the community. And then I had hurt my back, so I wasn't able to go back to work. And I happened to be out, like I said, Christmas shopping many years later, and I ran into his mom. And as I said, hey, she said, hey, she gave me a big hug. And as she hugged me, I heard her say, and I don't cry easy, but I'm going to cry. I heard, tell my mommy I love her. And I looked around, and then she said, Dylan passed away a couple weeks ago. And I said, honey, you were going to think this is crazy, but before you told me, I already knew, because I just heard, tell my mommy I love her. And then that weekend, I had a couple really unusual things with past patients coming through, and that's how it started.
Wow.
So,
Yeah, how brilliant.
But I think I had said to you too, I also have studied, and I share this to go along with your book, to say, yes, I'm so grateful that you've written this book, and from the perspective you've had, rather than going through the stages of grief, and that people are supposed to expect that it comes one after another after another. There is no timetable. Yes, somebody has identified steps, but you can go one step forward, 3 steps back, and then this way, and then that way. There's no rhyme or reason to it, right? It's very, very personal.
Oh, and I mean, another reason I wrote the book was because, again, in my grief, I was looking to read about bereavement generally. And I found all these books written by people who were sort of writing about it from the outside
looking in.
And they were so-called experts, and and they would say about the stages of grief and this and that and the other. But I didn't feel that it was written from the heart. It wasn't written from their personal experience. And so what I have done is I have written about my own personal experience of grief. It may not be the same as anybody else's, but I have written how it was for me. And I thought that people might just find that that resonates with them, and they can see that grief doesn't follow this sort of strange pattern that we're told it follows.
I'm so grateful that you did. And then I think I was reading some of the points that Gavin had said. And you know what? I just loved it because I've really tried to educate both my kids about this, that when your loved one passes away or somebody's loved one, everybody's there. Everybody's sending food, everybody's there. And then within the week after it goes and the weeks that follow, I've let both my kids really, really know this, that becomes the difficult, tough part, because everybody, goes on with their lives, and you're left with these intense emotions, especially if something happens very suddenly and the shock. And then, you know what I mean? And I find a lot of people tend to not want to contact the person because maybe they think they're going to upset them, or they don't want to make them cry, or whatever it may be. But I loved some of the points that you had shared. And I know when I was reading what Gavin had sent, what you found deeply helpful. And I'm wondering if you could share that with our audience, please, because I think people want to connect, but they're afraid because they don't want to make the person cry or feel they're going to upset them. Or what can they do to be helpful?
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, one of the things that I found really, really hurtful and difficult was when I met people and they started talking to me and they didn't mention Patrick.
Yeah.
Or that he had died. And I know that I sort of met a fellow granny at the school gate just very shortly after Patrick had died. And she didn't say anything to me at all about what had happened. And I was really, really upset. And then I saw her again a few days later, and the children had just gone off. And she said, "Oh, I'm sorry about Patrick. I didn't like to say anything when I saw you last week because, the children were around." And I thought, how silly is that? The children have lost their grandfather.
Mm-hmm.
So they need everybody also to be saying how really sad that he has gone. They need to hear that his death is acknowledged as well. And they don't need people pretending that everything is fine and hunky-dory. And even today, I still find that when people talk to me about Patrick and just mention him casually in the conversation, or say, "Oh, Patrick would have liked that," or "Oh, can you imagine how Patrick would have reacted?" or "Do you remember when Patrick did that?" I love it. I absolutely love that. And so, and somebody said to me, "Oh, I didn't mention Patrick because I didn't want to upset you."
That's what it is. I find it's not that people want to hurt you, but they're afraid of tears.
And I thought, well, how stupid is that? I'm upset anyway. And do they think that I've forgotten about Patrick? And if they start mentioning him, I'll suddenly remember. I mean, it doesn't work like that. Patrick is always in my mind. And so I want other people to celebrate his life, if you like.
I was just going to say the word celebrate. Like, celebrate him. Let's remember him. Let's talk about him. Especially since he goes on forever. And
exactly. And what, somebody was around the other day, and he was saying, "Oh, Patrick used to really annoy me when he did so and so and so and so." And I thought that was really funny. I
Yeah.
loved it. I loved the fact that he could talk about how irritating and annoying Patrick could be. It was, as if he was still thinking of Patrick in existence.
Yeah.
Which is
No,
what you
it's
want.
important because Michelle's
Yes.
here from Australia. I'm going to share Dave's message and then Michelle. Dave said, we were talking a little bit ago. He said, beautiful. Yes, we can continue our relationships with those who have passed. It's not goodbye. It's right. I think it's until we see you again, because I believe we see all our loved ones again when we transition back home ourselves. But Michelle, who I know has had a loss over the last year herself from Australia, she said, something I learned is not to not reach out, I think. So a quick hello text, and it does, just to let someone know you're thinking of them.
Yes, I think that's right, Michelle.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
Another thing I think is that a lot of people said to me, well, let me know if there's anything I can do.
And we don't know what you need, right?
And when you're absolutely distraught with grief, you don't have the bandwidth in your head to think, yes, I need some shopping or anything like that.
I haven't eaten in 2 days because the food is the last thing on my mind. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. So the friends who just came round and said, here is a meal for you. I'm putting it on the table. You sit down and eat it.
And eat, yeah.
They were the friends who were wonderful. The friends who came round and said, oh, I've come to take the dog for a walk. They were the friends who understood that you just need to go and do something unasked, because nobody who is deeply grieving is going to have the wherewithal to pick up the phone and say, please, could you do this or that?
You know why I like that you're sharing this, and I'm so grateful for your book, is because most people aren't insensitive to loss. I find that they're afraid of saying, they think they're going to say the wrong thing, or you know what, if somebody, like say they brought up Patrick's name and you started to cry, then it makes people uncomfortable. But what they don't realize is needs to have, it's okay to cry. It's okay. I mean, tears can be very healing. And, especially what you just said there, coming right from the heart, that instead of just, dropping off food, maybe you're not up for company or what have you, but like bringing it over hot and I'm just going to leave it on a plate here. I want you to eat, or doing the washing up for you, or taking the dog for a walk, or picking up some groceries. And people might use the excuse, well, I don't know what she needs. What would you need at the grocery store if you needed a few things, right? Like that simple.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I think that's absolutely. And yes, I think that a lot of people are scared. I mean, one thing is that people for a long time would say, oh, how are you? And you would often know that they didn't really want to know.
They're just being polite.
But, they were just being polite. Mm-hmm. And I found it quite troublesome because I didn't know how to reply. And I knew that they wanted me to say, oh, I'm fine. Yeah, or okay. But, I couldn't do that because it was a lie. And also I felt it was rather disrespectful to Patrick to suggest that I was fine when he died and I wasn't. And in the end, I worked out that if I just said, oh, I'm taking one day at a time, that would satisfy them. That sort of satisfied the social niceties. And it was also truthful. And people who really, really wanted to know how you were, they could then, say, yeah, but
how really are you?
That must mean that you're still on a tightrope. But for most people, that was a sufficient answer. And I was really pleased when I worked out how to reply to this question, how are you? because it's a tricky one. It's a tricky one.
I'm so glad you were sharing what you're sharing here, because this is going to be so helpful for a lot of people. Because I'm going to say it again, I haven't met many people that purposely are disrespectful, or, they think they're doing the right thing, but then they don't know what the right thing is. Because just as we've talked, I'd love to go back to some of the experiences and what people experience from loved ones when they pass. We don't talk about it. We don't talk about what is the things that would be helpful. How could, it's okay if the person you bring up has passed away, or they cry, or whatever that may be. So people know, because we don't talk about these things.
That's quite right. And we should.
Mm-hmm.
We certainly
Guaranteed,
should.
if you're born, guaranteed, and I'm not being morbid here, we're going to die. We're all going to die. So
yes.
It should be as normal as not celebrating the passing of someone so much, but how to best support somebody while they are going through that, which we will all experience sometime in our lifetime, just as we know how to celebrate birth, to be able to support people, I believe, when their loved ones pass. That should be just as natural, but it's not.
I think that's so right, Laurie. Yeah, It really is.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that every conversation contributes to helping people both cope with loss and supporting people who are grieving. Every conversation must be a good conversation.
Yeah. I agree. And like I said, the only reason I've had the conversations that I have with my children, because I've been around death so much, professionally, but also from a personal perspective, especially when it came to palliative care. And this is a question I asked a boyfriend many years ago. I think I was in second year of university. And his dad had passed a few years previous to me going out with him. But his dad had cancer, and it was about a year or two after his diagnosis when he finally passed. And I've never forgotten this question I asked him, and I've never forgotten the answer he gave me. And I guess I felt comfortable to ask it at that time, but I said, "Did you find it easier to process the loss of your father with the amount of time you had with the diagnosis versus somebody that passes very suddenly?" And he said, "No, it was no different. And the fact, even though you knew it was coming, it was like your mind wouldn't let you know it was real. So you still went through that kind of shock and all the emotions." Now, of course, I know that. But back then, being as young as I was, I didn't. I was glad that he was that honest with me. But like I said, I think as parents, to be able to educate our children about that, but it's just such a taboo subject. Yet, depending on what culture you're in and where you live, like I know it was over in the UK, and I haven't seen it in a couple of years, but they were starting to they made this series trying to normalize talking about death and dying and grief and what have you. And I'm not trying to be morbid here, but I really believe that it's a topic that I wish we were more comfortable with, because then we could have some of these beautiful conversations, like you said, so many people, once that door is open, right?
Yes. And I think that death is still taboo to a lot of people. And a lot of people, have never seen a dead body.
Oh, true.
And yeah, and I think it's a pity that death is sort of hidden away in our modern Western society.
It is.
Yeah. But I think things are changing. I mean, I think that people are beginning to realize that it is a good idea to talk about death.
Well, I always thought it was interesting because they were looking at different cultural practices in this series. I think it was on Facebook where I'd seen it. And one of the things I did like was the Irish wake, right? Because it was very normalized, where people celebrated the person's life when they passed, and the children were brought in. And again, not necessarily all the practices behind it, but the theory of it, of celebrating the person's life, or like I said in the book, let's get back to that. So have you put a section in there, Louise, where, sort of to educate people, or did you just do it all from your personal perspective? Like some of the things you've shared on here can be so helpful for people to hear this, I think, like what helped you.
Well, I wrote the book very much as a personal account, and I cannot tell other people.
I love it.
How to grieve or how to cope with bereavement. But what I did do was I just described how I felt, what helped me, what didn't help me, and I just wanted to give a very, very honest and personal account, which is what I did.
I like that, though, because can I ask you too? And again, I feel like I'm grilling you here, but I really appreciate your honesty. What else did you not find helpful? Because like I said, that's what I find mostly from people, is they're so afraid of saying or doing the wrong thing versus, just saying.
I'm trying to think now. It was basically people just trying not to talk about it and trying to, I suppose, treat me as if nothing had happened. That was the worst thing, the least helpful thing.
So trying to avoid discussing Patrick or what had happened then. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. What else was not very helpful? Well, again, I think I've said it. People saying, "Oh, well, how can I help?" when I didn't know how they could help. And people would say, "Oh, well, I don't suppose that you feel like doing anything yet, coming out for supper or going to the cinema or anything, but let me know when you feel like going out again." Things like that. And of course, I was never going to let them know when I felt like
I'm ready now.
I know. I mean, absolutely ridiculous. And I realized that people were saying it from a good place. But it just didn't work.
No, but these are things I appreciate, that because you've been through this and you know how it feels for yourself. We do have a question, but please continue sharing.
Oh, well, that I think is. I think I've come to the end. I think I've come to the end of things that weren't helpful.
I kind of just put you on the spot because we're talking about things that are helpful, but we do have a question from Michelle. She said, "I ask, and I love this question. Have you had any dreams about Patrick?"
Yes, I have. And in fact, funnily enough, I had one just about 3 days ago.
Okay.
3 nights ago, I should say, and it was very vivid. And,
nice.
Yes. And I was with him, and it was lovely. It was really lovely. And I've had some other dreams about him. They've all been lovely, though in the dreams he usually can't come with me. So so I have said in the dreams, "Oh, come," and he said, "I can't." But when I do dream about him, I always wake up and I have a lovely warm glow inside, which is very, very nice. So, yeah.
I always say to people, when they're bereaved, as you've called it, and I love that term. I think it encompasses, most people understand that term, that some of the easiest ways, I think, for our loved ones to connect with us, especially in the beginning, like how you've described, and again, rightfully so, that it was just enough probably just to wake up. You're on zombie mode. I hate to call it that, but it's just like you're on autopilot, basically, right? Like there's not words to describe it. But my point where I was going with this is the easiest place and way for our loved ones to connect with us is in our dreams.
Yes, it will. It could well be. I mean, I have had the smell of his aftershave as well.
Well, you've been awake.
And yes.
Okay.
Yes, but when I've been in bed, and but I read somewhere that it's actually quite difficult for spirits to make a smell. I don't know whether that's
I don't
true
believe
or
that.
not.
I don't believe that. No.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
You know what, though? That's interesting because I wanted to ask you. I'm glad you brought that up because I always say for myself, I know I can't speak for everybody else, but I know I'm never going to know all the answers until I transition back home myself, I say. But the reason why I don't agree with the smell being difficult is because I'm telling you the amount of smells, and that's where I was going, and I got off on another tangent. The biggest shock to me with mediumship was being so clairaudient and hearing spirit in the mind's eye, I'll say. I'm not hearing voices. It was like going to a different country. I speak French and some Spanish and English, okay? So with mediumship, and I was expecting to hear it because I hear, no, sometimes they will show you, sometimes you'll hear them, sometimes you'll just feel them, sometimes you'll smell them. I mean, I could go on and on the way they come through and they communicate. Some just come through with symbols. Like, it was just so odd for me compared to always relying on the fact that I had that hearing sense. So that's why I was saying I don't agree necessarily that it's difficult for smell, because I've had many a spirit come through and it'll be this unusual smell or a perfume or an aftershave, and you'll describe it and the person, that's so-and-so's, or that's so-and-so's. Or so I think I truly like to believe that our loved ones, when they're on the other side, will come through in the best way possible to let us know, as their loved ones still here on earth, that it's them. Does that make sense?
Yes, that does make sense. And, Patrick, he was a lawyer.
Yes.
He used to write a lot because he would, write for work. And he was a judge. And
brilliant too, I'm sure.
Yes,
Sorry, a
yes,
judge
he was.
too, you said?
And he was a judge, so he would be writing his judgments and things. And it seems to me that he chose WhatsApp to use as a medium to contact me, because that's all about writing.
Okay.
And that was his special skill. So whether that's right or not, I don't know. But that's
I don't think there
thought.
is any right or wrong answers. And when people ask me questions about things like sex, you're not asking me, you just are sharing it, right?
Yeah.
I always say that I believe that if you believe or you feel that this is the best way that Patrick, and you understand it, like you said, it's a writing type app, and with the writing that he did, it has to be right. It has to be right, because I don't think that any of us are in an authority position to be able to tell somebody else, no, that's wrong or that's right, because I wish I did know Patrick, but I don't. Maybe in spirit one day, what it'll be. But what I'm saying is, you knew him best. So if you really felt that that's why he chose that and he knew you best, it has to be right.
Yeah. It makes sense to me anyway. Yes.
It makes sense to me too. Same as with the aftershave, or did you say cologne, or like a?
It was aftershave.
Aftershave. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I remember, I think it was in the notes that Gavin had sent too. And I've seen this myself before, that you had spoken with a medium, I believe it was about 5 days after Patrick had passed.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I didn't really believe in an afterlife, but on the other hand, I was desperate to know that he was all right.
Yes.
I was really worried about him.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went to a medium very soon after he died and was desperate to communicate with him. And anyway, it was a bit of a disaster. The medium just didn't say anything that sort of resonated with me or made me think that she was in touch with him. And in fact, towards the end, she became a bit sort of irritated and rather ratty with me, because I kept on saying, well, no. And she really did actually sort of snap at me at the end. So that was not a good experience.
It wasn't your fault.
No, I know, absolutely. I guess she was very frustrated. So it was not a good experience. But I'm pleased to say that I tried again.
I'm glad you did.
Yes, and I guess I want to, spread the word that if you do go to a medium and for whatever reason it doesn't work for you, it is worth having a second go.
I almost feel like maybe she might have been picking up on somebody else around you, possibly, because
it just didn't work for me at all.
I have to tell you, you got to have, that's been the hardest part for me with mediumship. I'm going to be honest with you all out there, is I can tell you, I usually get people to record a reading so they're not writing notes. And I always tell them some of the stuff's going to come through and you're going to say, I had no idea what you're talking about. But I said, hang on to it because maybe a couple months from now, what have you. But the point is with mediumship, I can't tell you. And I understand that this was it wasn't as successful. And sometimes that happens. And I tell people, we're not 100% right. We're human too, right? But the point is with mediumship, I can't tell you the amount of people will say, no, I have no idea what you're talking about. And then by the end of it, or usually a day or two later, they'll be talking to a friend or a family member, and then they'll go, oh, wow, I understand that wasn't your experience. And I'm so glad that you tried again. But the point I wanted to make, I think it was something I had read, because I've seen this before, that people will say, you're not supposed to contact people immediately after they pass, that you may not be able to get through to them. Now, what was your thought about that? Did you feel that was true?
Well, actually, I phoned another medium up quite soon after the first poor experience.
Yeah.
And I found this medium on the internet, and she lived about 1.5 hours away from me.
Right.
And I phoned her up. And I said, hi, my name's Louise. I didn't give her my surname. And I'd like to come and see you because my husband died in February. So that was the only thing she knew about me. And her immediate reaction was, oh, that might be a bit too soon. And then she said on the phone, oh, he died in the middle of February, didn't he? And I said, yes. And then she said, oh, he died on the 16th of February. And I said, no, he died on the 18th. He lost consciousness on the 16th. So he was then in a coma for 48 hours. And she said it with great certainty, 16th, and that's what I'm writing down. And I love that, because I thought I can quite understand why he thought he had died on the 16th, because he hadn't been able to communicate. And it made sense for him to feel that he sort of left.
I want to share something. I'm
on the 16th.
Here. Okay.
And what I also thought was it just shows that it wasn't telepathy, even though that is amazing, because in my mind he died on the 18th. But I just thought, she must be in contact with him.
Okay, so I'm going to share something here. Now, again, I don't have all the answers. This is just my experience and what I believe has been shared, as I call collectively, from spirit on the other side. plus I've spoken with many people that are mediums and psychics with their loved ones, is when with what your Patrick went through, you said he had lost consciousness. And again, I'm very sorry for your
Yes.
loss. And it was on
Thank
the
you.
16th. Okay.
Yes.
I believe that our soul, if you will, our etheric body is able to leave the body and transition before the physical body actually stops breathing and the heart stops. So that could be maybe why he was saying he died on the 16th.
Yes, that could well be.
Again,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
I'm telling you, I've had and again, I don't have all the answers and I could be wrong. And only Patrick will probably tell you that when it's your turn to meet up with him again. But I've had many whose family members are going through something similar, and they'll come to them and tell them that I've already crossed over. Can go back and forth, if you will. Don't quite understand how it works, but they're able to leave the body, yet their heart's still beating, they're still breathing. Yeah, Dave just said, great point, Lorley. And again, have I witnessed or experienced this myself? No, but I know that I've worked with many that have, or have supported them while they were going through the loss. So to me, I'm wondering if that's maybe why.
Maybe. It could well be. And
Because
going back to
go ahead.
sorry.
No, you go ahead.
Yeah, going back to your point, how you've given readings and people have said no, and then later have said come round to it. I had an experience a bit like that. Later on, quite a few months after Patrick had died, and I was seeing a very good medium, and she said, "Oh, there's a woman here. A woman's coming." And I wasn't very interested in that. I didn't want a woman. I want
to talk to her.
yeah. But anyway, she said, "Oh, she's got brown hair, brown eyes. She's quite short. She's very feisty. She would call a spade a spade. She's very strong-minded, and I think she could be quite difficult. And oh, she's your mother-in-law." I said,
I definitely don't want to talk to her right now.
so I said, no. My mother-in-law was very gentle. She was blonde. She was tall. She had blue eyes. No, that totally isn't my mother-in-law. And the medium sort of carried on describing her. And I kept on saying no, and the medium said, "Yes, it's your mother-in-law. I'm sure it's your mother-in-law." I'm saying no. And in the end, the medium said, "Okay, we'll park that." And then I said, "Oh, it just sounds like Patrick's mother." And of course, Patrick was my second husband.
Yes, that's what I was wondering, if it was one of those mother-in-laws.
Yes, and I was just thinking of my first mother-in-law, because I'd never met Patrick's mother. She had died. She had died before I met Patrick.
That's why.
And so I'd never met her. And to be frank, I hadn't realized that somebody whom you hadn't met in this life could still come to you via a medium. And I said, "Oh yes, it sounds exactly like Patrick's mother."
Okay.
And I just thought, my goodness me, that medium was so vindicated, because she didn't let herself be dissuaded. She kept on saying,
"That's hard.
It's your mother-in-law." And I mean, anybody with half a brain would know who their mother-in-law was, wouldn't they? I obviously didn't have half a brain.
But no. I'm going to give you credit here, because I kept thinking, was this a mother, maybe from your first husband, or there has to be a reason why she did not recognize this mother-in-law? Because I kept thinking, hadn't thought that Patrick's mom had passed before you guys got together. That makes perfect sense.
Yeah. So anyway, so I was very impressed by that medium. I really was.
Yeah, well, I'm going to tell you a little secret. I work with obviously quite a few different people in the field. We work with people that we have like interests and what have you. And I can tell you that in one of the sessions, we had a famous movie star come through, give us a lot of information that we didn't know that we could verify, and including a very famous scientist from back in history. Again, gave us quite a bit of information, including we don't do physics. No, absolutely not. We're not going there. And then the person that was channeling started laughing because she said you literally could see it like being deleted on a computer screen. So they come through. Did we meet them before? No, but there you go. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And there had to be a purpose for why she came through. Not that I would ever ask, but I'm saying even though we may not have met them, there's a reason why somebody would come through.
No, she came through with a message, and the message made perfect sense.
There you go.
Yes.
Yeah. And it happens, but it rocks your confidence. I can imagine as a solicitor and you're doing something right that you know, like you're absolute certain that it's right. And then the person you're working with is going, no, I don't think so. No.
well, exactly. I mean, this is why I was so impressed by this medium, because she didn't let herself be deterred. She thought it was my mother-in-law, and she was right. And I was just being very blinkered, not thinking about,
because you didn't expect it. So
because I didn't expect it, and I'd never met her. But of course, the description fitted perfectly.
I love it. So now I wanted to ask you another question that I thought of while we were talking. You've got this beautiful dog, your spaniel. What's your dog's name?
Well, Phoebe.
Phoebe.
But the very sad thing is that actually Phoebe died last month.
Oh, so, I'm so sorry. Oh,
but I went and no, don't apologize. But I went and scattered her ashes on Patrick's grave.
Oh, I love it.
So I thought that was rather nice.
Because I was going to ask you, and then I want to share something about our beloved pets in a minute after that. But did you find when Phoebe was alive and Patrick, like with the books flying off the shelf or what have you, did you notice much of a reaction with Phoebe? Like did she recognized him, or she was relaxed about it, or?
Well, I think that sometimes, she would be looking at something that I couldn't see. And I think that sometimes she would be wagging her tail for no particular reason. And so, yes, I think that she was sensitive to energies.
I think all of our animals are, but I know this might sound crazy, but then again, we're talking about topics tonight that we don't maybe regularly talk about, but Phoebe's still with you as well. Our animals do come back. I don't know, did she sleep at the foot of your bed by any chance, or a special spot? Obviously she'd have a special spot, but.
Well, we used to snuggle up on the sofa.
Okay.
And then it was quite funny actually, because she wasn't really allowed upstairs. And after Patrick had died, I used to try and encourage her to come upstairs, because I would have loved her to sleep on my bed. And she would come up for a minute or two, and then she would run back down again. And she obviously had been so well trained. That she wasn't meant to be upstairs. That she never really relaxed upstairs. But we would snuggle up on the sofa in the evenings, and that was lovely.
Okay, so next time you're on the sofa, just see what you notice there, because they never leave us. I'll tell you just a very quick story, mostly for our listeners. But I was talking to a friend quite a few years back, and we were on video chat like you and I are. and she had a bad back, so she was laying back in her bed, and we were talking, and all of a sudden, I didn't say anything to her. On the pillow by her head, there was like this see-through shadow cat almost. And it was grooming itself and flicking its tail, and finally I go, did you used to have a cat that laid on the pillow next to you? And they said, oh yeah, that was my darling. Gave the name. I said, you are not gonna believe this, but that cat is like sitting on that pillow next to you. It's like looking at you now and what have you. She goes, take a picture. So I took pictures of the screen. She still has them. Sometimes she comes to this. She's not here tonight. Otherwise I would say the name. And I couldn't make it out, but she can make it out. And it was her cat. And same as my son's cat passed away, and she was around for the longest time. You'd feel her plop on the bed where she used to sleep on his bed and stuff. So I keep feeling like that for you. So see what happens if you notice that she's around.
I will. Yeah, thank you for that. Yes.
Because I think, you'll hear people say, I guess I think it matters. It's what people's experiences are, but you'll hear people say, well, you can't do that once you cross over. Like people can't visit back once they're crossed over and passed over to heaven. And it's like, says who? Maybe that was your experience, right? Like, I don't believe that there's limitations on the other side. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, I haven't had anybody say that to me, but I am quite sure that Patrick is often around. And, I often feel him. In fact, I feel him most of the time.
I love it.
And he didn't really like being driven by me. He liked to be the driver. And when I was driving, he would sort of quite often sort of say, oh, you're in the wrong gear.
I hear you.
Like that,
yeah.
Yes, because we tend to have manual cars in the UK rather than
I know how to drive those.
Automatic. Right. And so I would often not be in the gear he thought I should be in, and I could tell that he was always a little bit nervous when I was driving, and he was a very good driver. Yeah, and better driver than I am, but sometimes when I'm driving the car, I almost feel as though he's taken hold of the steering wheel. It's a funny sort of feeling, but I feel that he's got my arms and my hands, and he's guiding them.
I love it.
Yeah, and it's a lovely feeling, actually. It's a very nice feeling. But I feel that he's thinking, oh golly, yeah, I think I better just take
drive.
Let's get Louise home safely.
Oh, I love it. I love it.
And I feel that quite strongly.
Go ahead.
And this psychic friend of ours who saw the flame and then had the I want you to want me cheap trick, she gives me energy healing.
Oh, I love it.
And I love it because whenever I go to her, she'll always say, here's Patrick. And she'll say, oh, he's standing by your left side, or he's standing over there. And, oh, he's put his hands on you here. And that happens every time. And she's not making it up. She can really feel him or see him there. And I really like that. I really like that feeling.
I love it. So you know what's beautiful about that? I literally heard when you were saying not only do you get the energy healing, but it almost felt like the way you were describing. It's almost like an energy boost to your soul, that confirmation that he's still there, or he has his hand on your shoulder, or what have you.
Well, yeah, and what's extraordinary is she gives me this energy healing, and she says that sometimes she can feel that Patrick is also giving me energy healing, and she can feel the energy from him in my body. Isn't that extraordinary?
I think that I love it. And sorry, I had to block this person. They're being absolutely disgusting. that happens on YouTube. We get spammers there. No, I believe it is what I was going to say. I was positive you were going to share that because I don't know. I almost believe like we have jobs on the other side, and as somebody, and it's not a job to be with you. That's not what I'm talking about. But maybe that's part of what he does on the other side, right? Healing too. Never mind how much he loves you and knows that you need that. And it's coming from such a place of love and from the other side. Imagine, I can't even imagine how powerful that would be. So I think it's extraordinary. I think it's incredible. And I'm so glad you've shared that because I can't imagine for people listening and hearing this that never ever thought this was possible to hear these type of things, because that's where I was going to go with my next point was how has this been received by people that you've known, say you and Patrick as a couple, or people maybe that wouldn't believe in these type of things?
Well, I mean, I'm quite aware that my book is never going to convince somebody who has a closed mind.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. And I have some friends who are good friends, and they sort of say, yes, I believe you. You know, if you believe it's true, then it's true for you, which is sort of, you know, a wishy-washy and suggesting,
trying to be nice about it, supportive of you, but not true for them.
Yeah. And that's okay. That's okay. I'm not trying to change the world at all. What I'm wanting to do is to say to people who are open to the possibility, yeah, it's happened to me and it might happen to you. So there are quite a few, well, men in particular, I think, are reluctant to take it on board. So I have quite a few friends who are couples where the woman believes and says, yeah, this is wonderful and that's brilliant. And the men who say, well, I can't really believe that. So
what's your thoughts as to why do you think? I have a theory, but I'd love to hear your thoughts. Like, why do you think maybe men are more reluctant?
I have no idea.
No?
I don't know at all.
Okay, my thoughts are obviously, and I truly believe that as men and women, we each have our own gifts, but we think so differently. Haven't you found that most men that you've met, and I'm not generalizing here, but I'm just saying men are more analytical and very logic problem solving based type of thinkers, like it's either black or white, not that there's no in between, but they're very solution based, if you will, tangible, whereas this is something that isn't necessarily tangible, black and white.
Yes, I guess that is right. And also I suppose that, well, for my generation, and it might be different now, but for my generation, the men, you know, had to really learn how to be very logical and precise to do well in their careers. Whereas somehow it was easier for women to do more, how should I put it, airy-fairy things.
I agree. Well, I'm 57, so I hear what you're saying with the fact that I just say I find, actually, I'm going to read what Dave wrote. That's why I highlighted, because he's a gentleman. He says, I would say in general, men have less intuitive gifts. Not all men, but I agree. Dave is an astrologist and is in sort of this field. So that's why I shared his thoughts. Oh, and Michelle Pratt puts, well, men are from Mars for starters, women from Venus. You remember that book? That I've never read it.
I do. Yeah. No, a very good book.
Oh, what did he say? If, however, they would clean their internal energy, they would have more. So yes, Dave, like I said, is more spiritually based, and not all men are the same. That's why I said I didn't want to generalize, but Okay, I'm just going to from personal experience, okay? With my partner, I call him my husband, he's common law husband. After everything we've been through, he's been thrown 15 feet across the kitchen with nothing there. He didn't even tell me about it for 2 days. He went out and got his battery tester because he's sure he must have been shocked or something. It ended up being paranormal. To this day, he is still very skeptical that he's got to debunk it 6 ways to Sundays, like logically, before he'll even entertain. And again, that's not every man. And I'm not bashing men here. I'm just saying we think differently, right? And you've noticed yourself with having these conversations, right?
Yes, absolutely. And I don't know whether younger people are more open to all of this and younger men are open to all of this. I'm not sure. I mean, in my generation, men were still being brought up to be the provider and to be the sensible one. And that is different now.
Well,
and
I'm
that's
trying
a good
to
thing.
think. I have 2 boys. My eldest is the ones that have been around. Yeah, it just depends, I guess. How they've grown up and what they're. I guess that's pretty well for anybody. But I hear what you're saying because when you talk about any of these kind of things, I find I always said they were always so isolating because it's not like something you could have a chat while you're on queue or in line at the grocery store. Yet when somebody opens that door, all of a sudden everybody's had an experience. Everybody's had something. And it's like, why weren't we talking about this before, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That is so right. Yes.
Well, I'm hoping with books like yours that we can open this discussion up a lot more and have more of these conversations because it's so healing, isn't it?
Oh, Laurelie, that's why I wrote the book. I would love to open up the conversation. And yes, it is so, so healing. I think I would be in a terrible dark place still if I thought that there was nothing left of Patrick but memories. But I know that there is still his spirit. And it was a very special spirit. And so it's just wonderful that it's still around.
And I'm so glad he is too. Like you shared some really beautiful things, including the driving assist and the healing from the other side. And I hope to have you back on again soon, Louise, to hear more about your experiences and what you've got going on.
I would love to come back again, and I've thoroughly enjoyed talking to you.
I don't know who just did that, but somebody just turned my light off. I'm not kidding.
Well, I saw the light suddenly go, but I thought maybe you had turned it off.
I don't know if that was you, Patrick. I asked you to join in, so thank you if it was.
It could well have been.
I have no idea. It just went click.
Well, just as we were beginning to say goodbye, he did have a very good sense of humor. Yeah.
There you go. So how can people get a hold of you? Where can they buy your book and things like that, Louise?
Oh, well, I would love people to read my book, and it's called WhatsApps from Heaven, and you can go to Amazon to get it, or you can order it from any bookshop. And I've got a website, which is www.louisehamlin.com. And if you go onto the website, you'll see more about it and more about me.
I love it.
Yeah, but yes, there's a lot more in my book, and I want the world to know. I do feel, by the way, if I can just say this before we finish, the book was very, very easy to write, and I sort of felt that Patrick wanted me to write it.
I love it. Love it.
So it just flowed without any problem at all, and I do think that I was meant to write it.
I think you were too, because we need a book like that. Like you said, it's the kind of book you were looking to read. that you couldn't find. And I'm so glad that you wrote this and shared your story and your experiences with Patrick. Somebody wrote shows over. I think Patrick has a good sense of humor. I did say to him, I'd love to have you join in if you could. So thank you, Patrick. I want to also remind you, I want to thank everybody that was here. Michelle, we've got Dave. Who else did we have here? I don't want to miss anybody. And this isn't all that we had. Nicole, I didn't even get a chance to shout you out. Guiding Echo, she's another one of our hosts on Tuesday nights here with the show Guiding Echoes. And we had Manuel Lopez. We got lots more people watching just because we couldn't see the conversation. We got people from all over the place watching. So thank you. Please share this with your friends, especially if you know somebody maybe that's going through a bereavement themselves or has lost somebody they love. And I'm sure they will find this helpful and to be able to buy Louise's book. Thank you for being here, Louise.
Thank you very much, Laura Lee. It's been a great pleasure and delight.
I love having you. I can't wait to have you back on again. And I want to remind you, we this was kind of a Halloween show, but kind of not. But we were talking about the afterlife because we're doing all things Halloween this month. But I knew this topic would still fit in. But I want to remind you that next week I will be back, same space, same time. So 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Monday nights with the Angel Rock. Also, if you ever want to get a hold of me on Facebook.com/the Angel Rock. Say you want to book a healing session, a reading. I do mentoring. I have 2 groups on Facebook, Paranormal University for all the paranormal, and then the Angel Rocker Tribe for many of the things that we talked about tonight. But next week's guest, you guys are not wanting to miss. His name is David Hansel. Very, very, very gifted medium, close friend of mine, animal communicator, and holy crap, has he got crazy, scary stories. So you don't want to miss this. Again, Louise, thank you so much for being here. I loved having you here.
Thank you, Laura Lee.
And wherever you may be, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. And we will see you next week. I send you so much love and light. Until then, thank you.
Welcome to the Outer Realm with Michelle DeRoche and Amelia Pisano. Airing live on the United Public Radio Network, 105.3 FM in New Orleans. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Thursday night segment of The Outer Realm. We are broadcasting live on the United Public Radio Network, UFO Paranormal Radio Network, and 105.3 FM from New Orleans. We are fully sponsored by the amazing people over at Folgers Coffee, who have been on our journey since the very beginning. So thank you, Folgers. We appreciate you so very much. Also, tremendous gratitude for our sponsorship and the contribution of Justin Snicker, a.k.a. Dr. Snick, tongue-tied, the Sonic Surgeon, who's an award-winning composer of Halloween horror, sci-fi, and darkwave electronic music, most which can be found on Bandcamp, Spotify, iTunes, Amazon, you name it. Also, big thank you to Steve McGinnis, who is the man behind our artwork. So thank you. Tonight, The Outer Realm welcomes back Scott McClelland of Diablo Manor, who will be picking up where he left off in the last segment and is going to be sharing some of his paranormal experiences with us. So another great segment to check out. And here is the man. Hello. How are you?
Good evening, Michelle. How are you?
I am well. So happy to have you back. I had so much fun the last time you were on and found you extremely intriguing. Everything you do to me is intriguing. And it was a treat to find out about your family history, which was like a wow factor because there was so much things that we all think we know so much about, especially as we're all I would partake in many of midways, as they call them in our day, and so on, and not really getting a lot of the behind the scenes stuff, like some of the things that your family was responsible for and how far back it actually went and so on. So I would like to, if it's okay with you, since I'm sure there's a lot of people who were not able to tune in or who may have just found us. Shame on you if you just found us now. But anyway, let's maybe just catch them up and bring them up to speed. So I will let you take it away.
Well, thank you, my dear.
You're very welcome.
My family has been running large carnivals and freak shows for the past 104 years. This is what we do. My grandfather ran a large sideshow and freak show from 1920 through 1968, and he toured throughout the United States and Canada. Now, he also had a carnival where he invented most of the rides that were on it, and he was a rather interesting man. They called him the brain from the Ukraine, because the fact that he was so brilliant at reinventing ideas that were once maybe fun, but now they were super awesome. And that's what grandfather did. For instance, he back in the day, Ferris wheels were created by the Ferris Company. And the Ferris Company was out of Germany, and they basically made their Ferris wheels upright and shipped them overseas. And then when you finally got them into the prairies and you were traveling them upright, sometimes the winds would hit them pretty hard, and they'd basically blow over and splinter into basically nothing. And my grandfather thought this was absurd, so he invented the very first collapsible Ferris wheel that could be moved on a trailer base, which was the advent of trailer-based rides. Now, he was an equestrian rider, and so when he was young, he was watching a merry-go-round, and the horses on the merry-go-round would just go in circles. And between each horse would be, of course, a love seat for the parents to sit on, etc. And he was looking at the horses, thinking to himself, if I was a child on one of these horses, I'd want to feel the horse beneath me, because he was a lover of riding. And so he invented the step mechanism that makes the horses go up and down on the merry-go-round, which was the advent of the bobbing horse merry-go-round.
All the little things that we know and love to this very day.
Oh, so, absolutely. Another one of his inventions is quite popular, mostly in the United States, because of the fact that it was, well, to simply put it, it's the teacup ride at Disneyland.
Wow.
He invented the idea of the teacup ride first as a flying saucer ride, but the center wheel that you would turn in the teacup ride to make it go faster or slower while you were going in big circles was his idea. And so he created this because he wanted to make it a lot more fun than just going in a big circle in a teacup. You can now go in circles while you're going in circles, and why not make it as crazy as possible, because you can actually change the speed by just pushing the wheel. And he was a thoughtful man. He actually drilled holes in the seat. And many people ask me why he would have drilled holes in the seat of these little teacups. And it's because the children would sometimes puke, and there was no good way of cleaning it except if you had holes in the seat. So you could take a bucket of water, slosh it into the teacup, and boom, there you go. It's clean again. All the puke would be throwing out the little holes. Isn't that nice?
It was nice and thoughtful. I'm sure he was cursed along the way by the odd parent.
I'm sure he was, but the kids loved it.
Oh my gosh, yes. It must have been so much fun. People dream of running away to the circus and living this extraordinary bohemian type of life. It must have been quite exciting for your family growing up in this environment.
It was a very bohemian lifestyle. They were on the road most of their life. My grandfather had 9 children. Now, here's the thing. Back then, much like in certain circus families even today, parents would have kids to actually train and become a part of the act. And that's exactly what grandfather did. He actually had 9 kids that he could train into singing and dancing and doing comedy and playing musical instruments. And now he didn't have to pay them. He just had to feed them and house them. And that was the old way of doing things. My mom was the youngest person. Instead of being trained to be a performer in the show. My mom was, she worked the games and also was known to, train the monkeys, the tigers, and the bears. That was her vocation. But at a very early age, before she actually got to work on Grandfather's Carnival, she got to sit backstage while Mom worked. And my grandfather performed what we call in the old industry Grand Guignol Theatre. Now, Grand Guignol Theatre is a Parisian type of theatre that is based on morality plays. And ultimately, what takes place is there's a lot of bloodletting and gore on stage. It's kind of like a Tobe Hooper film on stage way back in the day. And of course, all the blood is fake. But my mom would have to watch her mother die 3 times a day.
That'd be hard for a child.
And so for a 4 or 5 year old child, that is a bit hard, I must admit. But in her mind, even as a child, she understood that what they were doing wasn't real, because by supper time, Mom was already cooking up pierogies and kubasov for everybody, and making sure that everybody was well fed. So obviously, Mom was okay, or a superwoman, or a zombie, one of the three. So,
one of the three, just coast along. And how about for young Scott?
Well, at the age of 11. I received a letter from my grandfather stating that whenever you come to our carnival, you always have a group of people around you because you're such a ham. Have you ever thought of becoming a magician like me? Well, I was like, fuck yeah, I'm 11 years old. Who wouldn't want to become a magician? But then I read further, and it stated that if I wanted to become a magician, I had to learn the oldest piece of magic known to mankind. It was called the cups and balls. Now, this had been performed during the Ming Dynasty, for the pharaohs in Egypt, even for the kings and queens of Europe. It's been all over the world, and it's been around for over 3,000 years. Now, he gave me 6 months to learn how to perform the cups and balls. And he said, if after that 6 months, when I performed it for him, I did not fool his eye, I would never work in the industry. And so I had basically 6 months to really, put my nose to the grindstone and prove myself. The day came, we were in his kitchen, and he said, "Boy, perform for me." And I finally performed the cups and balls. And thank God I fooled his eye, because I became that year a professional magician. And by the time 1978 rolled around, I was already producing my own shows at the age of 12. And I was touring with the Calgary Stampede, Edmonton's Klondike Days, and Regina's Buffalo Days. And I had my own small TV special on CBC that same year. So these things all happened all at once, and my career just built from there.
That's quite exciting. Quite exciting. So how did that affect school? I mean, at 12 years old, you're on the road.
Thank you for asking that. My teachers actually, they understood that I came from a circus family, a carnival family that performed. And they would allow me to actually go and do these shows if they were on contract, and I had to, of course, miss school. Of course, I'd have to make up for it. But my parents would sometimes put me on train cars and in buses with a note in my pocket, because I was only 11 or 12 years old. And it would say, "My name is Scott McClellan. Make sure I get to this place at this time, and that I'm on stage at this time." And so ultimately I'd be carrying my gear and my costume, and I'd just be sent on my way. And that's
that's just crazy. Different times, though. You could actually, it was a trusting thing. Like, I don't think you could get away with something like that now.
Well, exactly. But the thing is these contracts were big, and the people that I was going to were trusted. It was a rather exciting time period.
Oh,
and,
absolutely.
I'm very lucky, and I know that I live a charmed life. I was very lucky to apprentice under my grandfather, because I spent my formative years apprenticing under him from the age of 11 through 17. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that's like hands-on protege, basically, right?
Yes.
That's, wow, fantastic. So we fast forward into adulthood, and I do remember Carnival Diablo. I remember it quite well, actually. And I remember seeing the trailers, like, oh, there it is. So, and what I remember finding really interesting is I remember seeing it at a certain place in Toronto. We're going to start getting a little bit into spooky stuff now, because I was doing an article for Toronto Life magazine, and we were brought to this very interesting looking building, and I remember thinking, oh, this is really interesting if the trailer's outside. So anyway, I didn't think about it much beyond that, but what an amazing place. And before we get to that, I just want to let everybody know, get ready for that, because you're going to want to hear all about that one. But being younger, having these big families, living all over the place, paranormal experiences. You had to have had paranormal experiences, traveling everywhere.
Strangely, my first paranormal experience had nothing to do with my grandfather's side of the family that ran a carnival. It was my other grandfather's side of the family.
Okay.
My grandfather McClelland, who was my dad's father, was a Queen's Bench judge. And when we had family gatherings at his place, there was a lot of people that would come to the house. Like, this is in the late 60s, early 70s. And because there was so many people coming to the house, there wasn't enough bedrooms for everybody. So some people stayed on couches. But because I was the oldest child in my family, I was allotted the basement on a cot.
Nice.
And
nice.
So yeah, well, it is what it is. And
it is.
I wasn't really scared of the dark or anything. I didn't have that kind of problem as a child.
Right.
So I slept in the basement. But what happened was, one night I was laying in bed. It must have been around 11:30 in the evening. I had probably been laying there since 9 o'clock in the evening, just kind of like enjoying the ambiance upstairs, because you could hear the parents tittering and laughing and enjoying their game of canasta or whatever the hell they're doing upstairs.
Every family had to do the canasta.
I
was no different.
Bridge or canasta. What the hell? I don't understand it these days. Who plays that? But back then that was very popular. So I hear that, but there was a point at around 11 in the evening where I heard the voices still, and it was, it sounded like everybody was having a great time upstairs. What I discovered the next morning was my parents and everyone had gone to bed at 10. And so at 11 o'clock, when I was hearing these voices, these weren't my family. I was actually hearing other voices from beyond the realm. And I, without thinking, and because I wasn't scared, was okay with this. And it was very strange and very, very surreal, because once I made the realization, because I was a kid, I was only 9 when this took place. I was in the basement, and I was listening to laughter and voices from a completely different dimensional plane. And it wasn't my family. And it wasn't, I don't know if it was good or malevolent. I couldn't tell you. But that was my very, very first experience with paranormal activity.
Exactly? How old were you? How old were you?
I was 9.
9. Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. They broke you in nice and early.
Yes. Well, finally, by the time I was 16, I should say, when I was 16, my friend Charles Porlier, who is known as a very famous makeup artist now and special effects artist in Hollywood, he was the makeup artist for Christopher Reeve, who was in Superman, for all the time that he was alive, and also did all the special effects and everything for 13 Ghosts and Ghost Ship and a few other great Hollywood.
Love that movie too.
Yes,
yeah, those are well done.
Kill scenes ever. But that being said, Charles contacted me when I was 16. He was at the time 21. He was a few years older than me. He knew I loved horror, and he had contacted me and he said, "Scott, I'm making a haunted house, and I want you to be involved with me to help me build it." And so I apprenticed under Charles Porlier in learning how to make corpses and how to do the illusionary special effects that were needed to bring this place to life. And it was called the Kane Manor. Now, what it was a large, a manor of sorts, a mansion, where a butler would take you on a tour of the place. But the butler did not want you there because, you see, there was a for sale sign outside of the house. And the backstory was basically the house had gone up for sale because of the government, because the owners had passed on.
Right.
And the butler was still living there. So he didn't want the house sold, and he decided to kill anybody that came in. So you were being taken through the house by a psychopath.
Nice.
And I played the butler.
I see.
Now, the thing is we had a makeup room. The kitchen had been turned completely into a large black maze. So we gutted the kitchen, and it became these little tiny hallways that, would make you completely like disoriented. But our makeup room was in the floor. So there's, those old floor hinged doors that would take you to the basement. Yes. There was one of those in the floor. So I was probably a week into doing the Cane Manor at this point, and I opened up the door, and there was a light on downstairs. I could hear voices down there talking. I was pretty sure that other people were still getting their makeup on, which means I wasn't that late, because I was afraid I was late. And I got downstairs, and when I got to the bottom stair, I noted there was nobody in the basement, and all the sound stopped completely. Well, I turned on my heel and started running up the stairs. And as I started running up the stairs, right behind me, was the sound of footsteps. And because I was running up into the maze, it was already pitch black. I had to run through the maze with these footsteps behind me. I couldn't see a thing. And it exited out into the living room, which was done up like a Victorian living room. Well, I come running out, and I'm in a panic. And Charles is sitting there, and he goes, "You're late." And I go, "I'm sorry, but I can't seem to get downstairs. There's something keeping me from actually getting my makeup on." And he laughed at that and thought that I was just fucking around. Well, I wasn't. I finally had him come down with me, kind of holding my hand, as it were. And I put on the makeup, and I went and I did my job. There was one night, because we would work until 2 a.m, and then we would close and we'd do cleanup. There was one night we were there at 3 a.m. We had done our cleanup, and me and Charles were sitting in the living room talking, and there was an old clock on the mantle, and it was a beautiful old ornate clock, and it dinged 3 times. It was dong, 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 and I was like, "That's such a cool clock." And Charles went, "That isn't supposed to happen." I said, What are you talking about? It's just a beautiful old clock." He goes, "Pick it up for a second." I picked it up and I turned it around. It was an old clock that had been gutted. It was just there for looks. It was just a prop.
Right.
It had no interior. There was no clockwork inside of it, nor a bell to ding.
Right.
And it went off 3 times. So we were experiencing poltergeist activity, clairaudience. We were experiencing so many different things in that place, and here we are supposedly haunting it for fun for the public.
Right.
Little did they know
the spirits are getting into it.
To a real haunted house.
Right. And he had no idea when he chose this house that it
had no idea. It was a house that was up for demolition, so we actually got to tear out the walls and put in like moving bookcases.